Chapter 406. In the newly built government office of Lord Zhang's mansion in the northern frontier. The moment Li Zhong saw off Hu Yan, who had come here to inspect the work, his eyes were full of mockery. Wasn't the so-called inspection just to see what his subordinates were going to do next, so that they could inform those aristocratic families, so as to reduce the loss? Pitifully, Li Zhong had foreseen this. Therefore, when Hu Yan came here for the first time, he found that the documents recorded by Fallen Star Army were a bunch of confusing numbers. Additionally, Li Zhong had purchased a lot of books during this period. At the beginning, Hu Yan thought that Li Zhong was a pedantic scholar. However, after many inspections, Hu Yan finally found that those armored staffs were translating the numbers on the documents with different books. However, they didn't leave any notes. Instead, they just glanced at the documents and tore them into pieces before throwing them into wooden buckets with other scraps of paper. After that, they would wait for specialized people to collect them. This was the way the Fallen Star Army used to deliver intelligence during the war. Each group had a series of specially prepared books as translations. Only the veterans of the Fallen Star Army knew which page, line, and word those numbers represented. After memorizing the numbers, they would flip through the corresponding books to translate the intelligence. Finally, they would report it to Li Zhong, who was in charge of the Lord's mansion. "Maisi, tell them to reply to me. Just say." Li Zhong gradually lowered his voice. Hiding outside the courtyard, Hu Yan slightly frowned as he couldn't hear what Li Zhong said clearly. Neither did he know whom Li Zhong wanted his subordinates to reply to. However, it was Hu Yan's first time to know that someone other than Fallen Star Army was contacting Li Zhong in Shunning City. However, Hu Yan was also a scholar when he was young. After a few rounds of inspection, he had already memorized the book used by the different groups as a book. Today, he also saw a piece of paper with only a few numbers on it, but it was kept by Li Zhong alone. It was obviously important information, so he quietly memorized the string of numbers and hurriedly returned to his courtyard. He flipped open the book that his attendant had bought earlier, and began to read the meaning of the string of numbers. You are paid by the people help the people. The people below are easy to abuse, and the heavens cannot bully them. 16 words were found by Hu Yan one by one. After reading this line of words, Hu Yan only felt a chill all over his body. A chill ran up his spine and finally drilled into the back of his neck. Hu Yan suddenly shivered and collapsed on the chair. As a member of an aristocratic family, although Hu Yan knew that Lin Yuan wasn't easy to deal with, he had been beating around the bush, trying to get Li Zhong's policy against aristocratic families. After all, this work used to be planned by Lin Yuan and carried out by Lei Fan. The indigenous forces of the northern frontier, basically did not have the right to participate. Now that Lei Fan was gone, and Lin Yuan had sent Li Xian to handle this matter, even if Hu Yan wanted to, he did not have the ability to do so. These words, Hu Yan, who had read a lot of books, had never seen them in that book, so he could only conclude that these words came from Lin Yuan. In addition, Li Zhong had purposely shown these words to him, so it should be Lin Yuan warning him not to cross the line when doing things. Motherf asterisk cur, motherf asterisk cur, motherf asterisk cur. Hu Yan cursed a few times, and his eyes were already bloodshot. He said hatefully, "Surnamedly, you don't want me to have a good time, so I won't let you have a good time either. How dare you report this matter to Lin Yuan? Good, 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 I'll let you know who's the biggest boss in Shunning City." If Li Zhong had used other means to warn Hu Yan, because of Lin Yuan's terror, Hu Yan would have admitted defeat. However, Li Zhong had used Lin Yuan's words to make an issue out of it, which made it easy for Hu Yan to connect the dots that Lin Yuan already knew what he had done during this period of time. When he thought of Lei Fan's fate, even if Hu Yan said that he was not afraid, his heart was still terrified. At this time, Hu Yan, who knew that there was nothing he could do, could only drag Li Zhong down with him to perish together. In Li Zhong's mansion, Gao Fenjin was still wearing his heavy armor, and said in a low muffled voice, "Dragon King said that if you do this, Hu Yan will completely lose his mind. If he refuses to admit defeat, we will have a tough battle to fight." "It's not a problem, Uncle Gao." Li Zhong clasped his hands and said with a smile, "You still don't understand the Dragon King's intention. Although the Dragon King has set up his own statue in the northern frontier, It is not to show his divinity, but to give the people of the northern frontier a way to reach the sky. In this way, not even the slightest movement in the northern frontier can escape the eyes of the Dragon King. First, eliminate the sects, then weaken the aristocratic families. After these two things are done, the Dragon King should weaken the authority of the officials in the northern frontier, and then increase the authority of the new law in the northern frontier. Ah! Gao Fengjian was slightly startled. For a moment, it was difficult to understand Li Zhong's meaning. In short, the northern frontier that the Dragon King wants can only have one authority, and that is himself, or rather, the new law in the northern frontier that he has compiled. The so-called officials and army are just tools to maintain and implement the new law in the northern frontier. These people only need to have enough ability to complete the wishes of the Dragon King. They don't need to have any authority, otherwise the reform in the northern frontier will be meaningless. After a few decades, these officials and army commanders will become new aristocratic families and sects, and will be even more difficult to deal with than they are now. To put it simply, the Dragon King wants to rule the northern frontier by law, and not the northern frontier by the king. As long as the new law in the northern frontier exists, and can restrain the people of the northern frontier, then the existence of the northern frontier king does not have much meaning at all. Li Zhong cupped his hands in the direction of the monster forest and said with a smile, "To be able to meet a hero like the Dragon King in this life, I, Li Zhong, should be able to put my knowledge to good use." Gao Fengjian scratched his head and said in a low voice, "Then just say that the Dragon King wants to deal with Hu Yan, and doesn't want the northern frontier to continue to have the title of king of the northern frontier. Wouldn't that be the end of it?" That's fine too." Li Zhong was choked by Gao Fengjian, and could only roll his eyes. However, now was indeed the best time to make a move on Hu Yan. Lei Fan had already died of illness, and his corpse was hung in the sect of the Blood God. The weak nature of the position of king of the northern frontier had long been seen through by others. If another Hu Yan fell, there would be no need for the next king of the northern frontier to exist. Moreover, it was Hu Yan who had committed the taboo. If the Dragon King wanted to get rid of Hu Yan, no one would be able to find any fault with it. It was much better than Lei Fan who died without knowing the reason. After all, the people of the northern frontier would not understand why the dignified king of the northern frontier wanted to usurp power. Wasn't the king of the northern frontier the highest official in the northern frontier? Although the internal strife in the Shenwu dynasty was still ongoing, it was not far from being pacified. Getting rid of Hu Yan now was better than finding a groundless crime in the future. Otherwise, who knew how many people would use this as an excuse to attack the northern frontier? Chapter 407. Outside Shunning City, in a barren mountain without any vegetation, Lin Yuan was sitting cross-legged. His eyelids were closed, and his breathing was even, as if he had fallen asleep. Suddenly, there was a series of footsteps behind him. Lin Yuan said without turning his head, "I thought I would have to wait for you for another 4 hours. I didn't expect you to come so soon. The Demon Emperor summoned me. Even if we are thousands of miles apart, I have to put down what I'm doing and wait for your orders." The man behind Lin Yuan did not have the slightest emotion in his tone. He wore a ghost mask on his face, and a black hooded robe covered his body. Lin Yuan could barely see that this man was very tall and sturdy. Without waiting for Lin Yuan to speak, the man stopped and said with a smile, "This subordinate has done my best for the Demon Emperor since I joined the Council of the Demon Emperor. I don't know why the Demon Emperor suspects that this subordinate is related to those guys hiding in the dark." Although there was laughter in his voice, the air was filled with a chill as soon as he finished speaking. "It's not that I suspect you, but you told me yourself that you are not clean." Lin Yuan still did not turn around, as if the man behind him was not a threat to him at all. Even his tone was extremely calm. "Oh, I'm all ears." That man put the dagger back into his sleeve, sat down cross-legged, and stared at Lin Yuan. Before this king took over the northern frontier, the Shenwu dynasty had already suffered a great change. The Qingjiang dynasty and the Frost Mirror dynasty besieged it. The Hengduan Mountains and the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas also did not miss this opportunity. It could be said that the Shenwu dynasty was about to be destroyed. At this time, the remnants of the Jiao clan secretly moved and wanted to take this opportunity to overthrow the Xinwu dynasty. However, no matter how many tricks the remnants of the Jiao clan had up their sleeves, they still relied on the Hengduan Mountains to survive. At that time, the imperial court only intended to keep Shunning City in suspense, to create a little pressure for the Xinwu dynasty. However, the remnants of the Jiao clan, who couldn't even survive outside the Hengduan Mountains, dared to put their master in deep trouble, and intended to help the demon beasts take over Shunning City. But this kind of taboo, not to mention the remnants of the Jiao clan who were still shouting orthodox slogans, even those evil cultists who everyone had the right to kill might not have the guts to do it. After all, no matter whether this matter succeeded or not, it had touched the bottom line of human beings. When the time came, the entire Tianwu continent would be purged. These small forces who lived in the darkness but didn't have the ability to overturn the entire world would have no way to survive. Therefore, the remaining members of the Jiao clan set their eyes on the Assembly of Demon Monarch. They naively thought that after the Assembly of Demon Monarch had done such a thing, all the dynasties would just wipe out the Assembly of Demon Monarch. Therefore, they changed into our uniforms and planned to take over the city wall of Shunning City. Lin Yuan's voice sounded indifferent, as if he was talking about something that had nothing to do with him. Yes, I know about this. That person nodded, but changed the topic and asked, but, what does this have to do with me? At that time, you were in charge of the Assembly of Demon Monarch in Shunning City. Even if I had great abilities, I couldn't have done it under your nose, right? The remaining members of the Jiao clan were naive. They thought that by framing the Assembly of Demon Monarch, the Xinwu dynasty would only wipe out the Assembly of Demon Monarch. They could then regain control of the Dark World in the northern frontier, and become the uncrowned king of the underground order of the Xinwu dynasty. But they didn't think that compared to the Assembly of Demon Monarch, which was rooted in the northern frontier, the remaining members of the Jiao clan, who were scattered all over the Xinwu dynasty, and even had the support of the people in some places, were really not presentable. If they had to wipe out the Jiao clan, the Xinwu dynasty would never let go of this opportunity to attack the remaining members of the Jiao clan. Speaking of this, Lin Yuan paused, and then smiled. So at that time, it seemed that the people who gave advice to the remaining members of the Jiao clan were either complete idiots, or they didn't care about the life and death of the remaining members of the Jiao clan at all. That is, a third party intervened. They wished that the Assembly of Demon Monarch would die together with the remaining members of the Jiao clan. Not bad. It's reasonable and clear. But that person's tone still didn't change, and he asked again, what does this have to do with me? The Assembly of Demon Monarch had eyes and ears all over the northern frontier at that time. With my identity, everything I did, and who I met, it should all be recorded, right? Lin Yuan's closed eyes slightly opened and sneered. On the surface, this matter indeed has nothing to do with you. Even when Sherdong reported to me that you were involved in this matter, I only said a few words to him, and didn't suspect you much. Even if the remaining members of the Jiao clan weren't wearing the uniform of the Assembly of Demon Monarch, I wouldn't have suspected that it was the higher-ups of the Assembly of Demon Monarch. That person was silent for a moment, and then suddenly smiled bitterly and murmured, I see, I see. Previously, the remaining members of the Jiao clan had changed into the uniform of the Assembly of Demon Monarch to seize the city wall. Although Lin Yuan didn't pursue the matter, he already knew that there was a traitor among the higher-ups of the Assembly of Demon Monarch. However, he didn't have any evidence. Even if he caught the traitor, he naturally wouldn't be stupid enough to admit that he was the traitor. But this time, when attacking the sects in the northern frontier, the higher-ups of the Assembly of Demon Monarch still didn't keep their hands clean. Especially when the information about the sect of the Blood Divine was suddenly cut off, but no one, including Lin Yuan, received the news. This kind of thing wasn't something that just anyone could do. It was normal for Lin Yuan to suspect him. Moreover, during this period of time, in order to not make any mistakes, he personally stayed in Shunning City to ensure that the news that the sect of the Blood Divine was out of control wouldn't spread to Lin Yuan. Since the last time, when the remaining members of the Jiao clan pretended to be members of the Assembly of Demon Monarch, Lin Yuan had set up some spies in the Assembly of Demon Monarch. Some information that even the higher-ups of the Assembly of Demon Monarch didn't know about would be mysteriously hung at the place where the information was sold. Now that he thought about it, perhaps Lin Yuan had been monitoring them for a long time. Demon Monarch, you are indeed as powerful as the rumors say. I am sincerely convinced. That person took off his black hood and mask, revealing a waxy yellow face. It was a face that was hard to find in a sea of people. However, the waxy yellow skin was obviously due to long-term malnutrition. It didn't match his burly figure, so it was quite distinctive. Although this person didn't look very eye-catching, he was the second most famous person in the Assembly of Demon Monarch. Whether it was Su Nan, who founded the Assembly of Demon Monarch, or Shi Dong, who was promoted by Lin Yuan from Shunning City, even if the two of them were tied together, their prestige in the higher-ups of the Assembly of Demon Monarch might not be comparable to this vice president, Ding Zai, who didn't have the aptitude for cultivation, but was personally involved in everything. Chapter 408. As the saying goes, give me a peach in return. Lin Yuan lazily turned around and said calmly, I have already told you how you were exposed. Are you not going to tell me who you are, and what is your purpose of infiltrating my association of the Demon Emperor? Lin Yuan had a mocking smile on his face as he said coldly, or are you going to let me ask you myself? The moment Lin Yuan said that, Ding Zai subconsciously shuddered. Tianwu Continent's interrogation and interrogation by torture were actually still the same. It was nothing more than torture and the like. However, as long as Lin Yuan caught a person alive, and it was not the kind of person who was brainwashed to only know loyalty to his own organization, he would definitely be able to ask what he wanted. Although Ding Zai did not know what methods Lin Yuan was using, but even the elite member of the Ether Association, who was known as the leader of the underground forces of the Xinwu dynasty, was unable to withstand Lin Yuan's interrogation and told him everything he knew. To others, whether this Ether Association member told him or not was a secret. But Ding Zai, who was in charge of intelligence work in the northern frontier, was very clear. Not only did the other party tell him everything, he even shamelessly asked Lin Yuan for a job, intending to live his life in the northern frontier while concealing his identity. Although Ding Zai did not mind being enemies with Lin Yuan, but he really did not want to experience Lin Yuan's interrogation methods. Since Lord Demon Emperor has asked, this subordinate will naturally tell you everything, but Ding Zai narrowed his eyes slightly and smiled coldly. I have to give Lord Demonic Emperor a reminder. I'm not in cahoots with the Ether Society. In fact, for a faction like the Ether Society that isn't even presentable, the organization behind me can just reach out and crush them like a bug. Lin Yuan lifted his chin and sneered. If you say so, then I know what to do. However, the Almighty behind you is blocking that door. Do you really have the time to deal with me? When I reach the desolate demon realm, or even a higher realm, do you think that the organization behind you will still dare to provoke me? Ding Zai suddenly fell silent. That door. It could be said to be the highest level of secret in the entire Sky Martial continent. The slightest mistake could lead to the destruction of the entire continent. It wasn't that there weren't any cultivators at the Void Netherworld realm or higher. In fact, there were quite a few of them. It was just that they were all outside that door, guarding against whatever was inside. Logically speaking, with Lin Yuan's realm and background, it was impossible for him to know about the existence of that door. Even Kiran, the beast master of the Hengduan mountain range, only had some guesses but did not have any concrete evidence. Unless this Lin Yuan was truly the reincarnation of some ancient greater demon. Seeing Ding Zai's silence, Lin Yuan suddenly sneered and said in a cold voice, the organization behind you is actually not interested in the northern frontier. What they want to know, a small fry like you doesn't have the qualifications to know. So even if you seize the northern frontier from my hands, you won't be able to escape death if you don't get what the big shots want. Gulp. Ding Zai swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Just as Lin Yuan said, with the scale and level of the organization behind him, it was impossible for them to set their eyes on the northern frontier. Even if the northern frontier was prosperous after Lin Yuan's reform, it couldn't attract the interest of those big shots. For them, 1 or 2 territories might not be as tempting as a disciple who could pass on their mantle. But the key was that the orders from above were only for them to infiltrate the northern frontier. They didn't mention the specific purpose at all. And these unlucky people who took the mission to sneak into the northern frontier didn't want to wait a moment longer. Recently, they had covered up the activities of the Blood Divine Church because they wanted to use the hands of the second generation to get rid of Lin Yuan, the biggest obstacle. Then they could take over the northern frontier. After handing over the northern frontier to the organization, they could receive the reward and return to the organization's paradise to cultivate. Now, after listening to Lin Yuan's words, Ding Zai only felt a chill all over his body. At this moment, he realized that what the big shots wanted was indeed in the northern frontier. But it was nothing else but something in Lin Yuan's hands or some secret on Lin Yuan. For them, the northern frontier was nothing more than a small piece of land that they could destroy with a wave of their hand. If they misunderstood the meaning of those big shots, would they have a good end when they returned to the organization? I just gave you a few words of advice. Why are you sweating so much? Lin Yuan's heterochromatic eyes flashed with cold light. He said in a low voice, "Tell me, which families have come to the northern frontier?" From the information obtained in the secret realm, there were many sects in ancient times, but the most powerful ones were the Fairy Cloud Temple, the Golden Lotus Temple, and the Boundless Academy. They were the leaders of the three giants of Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism. Even the powerful Freedom Yard was just a branch of the Golden Lotus Temple, and it was a branch that couldn't be seen in public. In addition to these three giants, there were all kinds of big and small forces. However, in the timeline earlier than the ancient times, the Tianwu continent had undergone great changes. Countless immortals broke through the gate of heaven and left countless methods and inheritances for people to cultivate. This was the origin of cultivators and demonic beasts. At that time, the cultivators were incomparably powerful. Most of the Void Realm cultivators were like lackeys. Now, the various divine beast clans were all the more prosperous branches of the ancient times. It was said that they had all migrated from the gate of heaven, and some of the weaker ones had either gone extinct or became the rare ancient species. Of course, great ancient clans like the Dragon Phoenix Kirin were still existences that could look down on the heavens and earth. However, this prosperity of the Tianwu continent's cultivation world did not last for long. When the timeline had just entered the ancient times, the gate of heaven moved again. However, this time, it was not some kind of opportunity or gift that came out. Instead, it was demons and ferocious beasts that only chose humans to devour. In almost the entire ancient times, it was humans and demonic beasts that fought for survival against the mutated beasts that came out of the gate of heaven. The demonic beasts and evil cult members of today's purgatory were all hidden dangers left behind by those demons and ferocious beasts. Since the ancient times, the gate of heaven had always remained open. Until now, countless indescribable monsters had tried to invade. They had always coveted the Tianwu continent, either destroying it or enslaving it. The only thing that could be confirmed was that they did not have the slightest bit of goodwill towards the natives of the Tianwu continent. Until now, all the cultivators of the Void Realm and above, regardless of whether they were willing or not, had to guard the vicinity of the gate of heaven. The experts who left behind their inheritances even had to take the risk to enter the gate of heaven to explore and see what was going on there. However, those who entered the gate of heaven never came back. Chapter 409. However, these things were a secret to most of the cultivators in Tianwu continent. It wasn't that there weren't any cultivation techniques in the Void Realm and Desolate Demon Realm, but those who mastered them were all near the Heaven's Gate. And these powerful cultivators were destined to fight to protect this world, so they couldn't be like the low-level cultivators and open up sects to recruit disciples. They could only send out disciples who couldn't resist the creatures in the Heaven's Gate to open up sects and select suitable seedlings from the countless people in Tianwu continent to carry on their legacy. This was also the reason why there were so many sects in Tianwu continent. Lin Yuan also had some guesses about the existence behind the Heaven's Gate, but he didn't have the strength to prove it. After all, the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas and Ravenfield Manor were all things he had heard of in his previous life. The world behind the Heaven's Gate wasn't the world he was in his previous life, But there must be some connection between the two. There might even be a path to return to the world of his previous life. But for now his strength was still too weak. In the eyes of those big shots in the Void Realm and Desolate Demon Realm, he only knew these secrets and had the qualifications to select disciples for them. He didn't even have the qualifications to guard the Heaven's Gate, so how could he have the strength to enter the Heaven's Gate? But with the system, as a cheat, Lin Yuan believed that it wouldn't be difficult for him to find a way back. The Shanglu Association that I am in, the Four United Group that the Fire Kirin belongs to, and a person from the Second Life. With Lin Yuan holding the Death Gate, Ding Zai naturally didn't have the guts to threaten Lin Yuan. He could only smile and obey Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan's rock skin closed up slightly. After all, the secret realm was something left behind from the ancient times. In these long years, countless new forces rose, and naturally countless old forces were destroyed. Anyway, the two organizations that Ding Zai mentioned weren't recorded in the palace, so even if Lin Yuan wanted to pretend to be unfathomable, he still didn't know the background of the other party. After pondering for a moment, Lin Yuan opened his eyes slightly and asked, "The person from the Second Life, is he the ancestor of the Blood Divine sect?" "Yes, according to my investigation, that person is called Yang Qinglin, a person from more than 14,000 years ago. Although he wasn't the founder of the Blood Divine sect, he was once the most dazzling genius of the Blood Divine sect. However, he was schemed against by an enemy sect and died's death. But I don't know what method he used. He actually came back to life after 14,000 years. Lin Yuan was silent. Even a demon of the Desolate Demon Realm like the Fire Kirin had the method of resurrection, let alone a being from 14,000 years ago, whose cultivation was 2 realms higher than the Kongming realm. Don't think that he was easy to bully just because he was reincarnated. After this old thing mastered the method of resurrection in his previous life, he had set up many backup plans and trump cards for himself. He was definitely a tough nut to crack. Yang Qinglin wants to meet me. What do you think he wants to do? Lin Yuan's eyes widened a little, revealing a dignified aura. He knew even less about the Blood Divine sect, which wasn't ranked in the northern frontier, and had been around for longer than the Qiao family. It wasn't easy to find someone who knew about it, so naturally, he had to ask. "This," Ding Zai frowned and pondered for a moment, then slowly said, "I heard that the Blood Divine sect has a secret method that can absorb the blood of living creatures to improve one's cultivation. Although it is suspected of pulling up seedlings to help them grow, whether it's from the Heavenly Dipper realm to the Kongming realm or from the Kongming realm to the Tao, the threshold is not easy to cross. I guess that this Yang Qinglin is not confident that he can cultivate to the Supreme Realm by himself, so he wants to use this method to help himself break through." When Lin Yuan read novels in his previous life, he often saw some strong people reincarnating and recultivating, and easily entering the realm of their previous life. However, in reality, this was not the case. The method of reincarnation and recultivation was heaven-defying, so how could there not be any restrictions? When an immortal reincarnated, there was still a period of dust. If one didn't work hard to cultivate, or if there was a friend from his previous life to guide him, even an immortal would fall into the mortal world and become an ordinary person. Therefore, even if one reached the immortal realm, reincarnation and recultivation was a gamble. The slightest carelessness would cause all the hard work to vanish. Moreover, the supreme realm of the Tianwu continent might not necessarily be inferior to the immortals that Lin Yuan knew. So, he wants to get permission from this king to let him use the blood sacrifice of the people of the northern frontier to break through? Lin Yuan's multicolored eyes flashed with a cold light, causing Ding Zai, who was standing opposite to him, to break out in cold sweat. At this moment, Lin Yuan was really too terrifying. Ding Zai did not doubt that in the next moment, Lin Yuan would suddenly explode, turning into a ferocious beast that would swallow him whole. After 4 to 5 breaths of time, Lin Yuan finally calmed down the surging anger in his heart, and said in a deep voice, "Although the power behind you has not shown any goodwill to this king, but compared to the other families, you have not done anything hostile to this king. Therefore this king will consider giving you a chance. Perhaps in the near future, our two families can join hands." If it was any other person who said this, Ding Zai would definitely scoff. But when these words came from Lin Yuan's mouth, there was no element of boasting. After all, the secrets on Lin Yuan's body were not known even by the big shots behind him. They could only believe that Lin Yuan was indeed the reincarnation of some ancient demon. However, there were also many people who had divined Lin Yuan's origins. It was just that none of those big shots were willing to reveal Lin Yuan's origins. Instead, it made Lin Yuan even more mysterious. Moreover, putting aside the secrets on Lin Yuan's body, just based on the speed of cultivation, Lin Yuan was also a monstrous genius. In less than a year and a half, he had cultivated from a wild beast to a mountain lord. This kind of cultivation speed, not to mention ordinary people, even Yang Qinglin, who had reincarnated with his previous life's memories, was far from comparable. If he was given a period of time, how far would he be from those big shots? But Ding Zai did not directly agree, because he was very clear that there was no free lunch in this world. Previously, he had covered the eyes of the Demon Emperor Association and wanted Yang Qinglin to kill Lin Yuan. According to Lin Yuan's personality, he would have already been sentenced to death. But at this moment, not only did Lin Yuan not pursue the matter, he even showed goodwill. Therefore, Ding Zai was very clear that Lin Yuan should have taken a fancy to him, or the help that the organization behind him could provide. Chapter 410. Don't look at me like that. This king isn't a fool. He knows you won't attack him directly, but revealing some information should be within the scope of your ability, right? Lin Yuan looked at Ding Zai with a mocking gaze. Obviously, he had seen through Ding Zai's little thoughts. But thinking about it, although Lin Yuan's current strength was not enough, his cultivation speed was there. In addition, the northern frontier was currently a hot new force. For those big shots, hundreds of years was not a long time. As long as Lin Yuan was willing to become their ally, they had plenty of time to wait for Lin Yuan to grow up and give some help to Lin Yuan in advance. Even Lin Yuan himself could not think of any way to refuse such a temptation. The quadripartite group sent a supreme cultivator, nicknamed Kong Lezin. He can be considered as a flag-bearer of the new generation of the quadripartite group. I don't have much information about him. After all, those who have seen him in action are all dead. There are only rumors that this Kong Lezin cultivates an ancient inheritance and is extremely proficient in divination. To him, misfortune and fortune can be seen with a single thought. I heard that the Fire Kirin was sent here by the quadripartite group with the intention of replacing the Beast Lord Kirin as the Beast Lord of the Hengduan Mountains. However, the Fire Kirin did not fight the Beast Lord Kirin and found a hidden place to hide in the periphery of the Hengduan Mountains. However, it still has a supreme treasure that belongs to the quadripartite group. This time, Kong Lezin came to the northern frontier to retrieve this treasure. Therefore, this subordinate boldly speculates that the Shifter Emperor should soon meet this Kong Lezin. After all, you came to Shunning City with the Fire Kirin. Now that the Fire Kirin is dead, its treasures are most likely to fall into your hands. Ding Zai licked his lips and felt that his throat was a little dry. After all, with Kong Lezin's rumored abilities, he had probably deduced that Ding Zai had been betrayed. Although it was impossible for him to know the specific conversation between Ding Zai and Lin Yuan, it was not difficult for him to see the scene of Ding Zai talking to Lin Yuan. Therefore, Ding Zai had taken a big risk by revealing Kong Lezin's identity. Although Shanglu Association and Four United Gang were on the same level, Kong Lezin couldn't possibly not give them face. However, Ding Zai and Kong Lezin weren't on the same level. If Kong Lezin wanted to vent his anger on him, Shanglu Association wouldn't be able to protect him. Now he could only hope that Lin Yuan was really that valuable in the eyes of those big shots. This way he could rope in Lin Yuan as a future ally. Only then would those big shots personally speak up to protect him, lest he become a sacrifice. Another thing is news about Yang Qinglin. Although this guy is a figure from 14,000 years ago, there are quite a lot of records about him. It is said that Yang Qinglin was extremely ferocious when he was young. Not to mention provoking him, even if he didn't like you, he would think of ways to make you pay a painful price. Therefore, the Shifter Emperor didn't agree to meet Yang Qinglin previously. You even secretly captured Old Demon Blood Sea. If Yang Qinglin knew about this, I'm afraid he would hate the Shifter Emperor to death. It is even possible that he would personally take action. Since he had decided to unite with Lin Yuan, Ding Zai immediately became a lackey. However, at this point, Ding Zai helplessly spread out his hands and said bitterly, "To be honest, the Shifter Emperor, this subordinate has already sent someone to inform Yang Qinglin of your situation. Therefore, this subordinate guesses that he can't wait to skin you alive." Lin Yuan. It was not terrible to be targeted by a cultivator who had just entered the Heaven Gang realm. In Lin Yuan's opinion, there was no difference between a cultivator of this realm and him being an enemy and giving him attribute points. However, his opponent had changed from a novice who had just entered the Heaven Gang realm to an old devil who had left many trump cards for himself before reincarnating. This made Lin Yuan unhappy at all. However, Ding Zai's information was indeed terrifying. Not many people knew that he had secretly captured old demon Blood Sea. The one who was most likely to sell him out to Ding Zai should be Winesword Mystery, who had left in a hurry. However, Winesword Mystery had no reason to do so because Ding Zai could be considered to be the one who had single-handedly orchestrated the destruction of the Jiao clan's remnants. Although there were still traces of the Jiao clan's remnants in various parts of the Shenwu dynasty, the northern frontier was the border of the Shenwu dynasty, and coincidentally near the Hengduan mountain range. Naturally, the Jiao clan's remnants would treat it as their base camp. Therefore, almost all the survivors of the Jiao clan gathered at the northern frontier. First, they were suppressed by the Shifter Emperor Association. Then, they lost contact with the Hengduan mountain range. Then, under the control of Ding Zai and the Shanglu Association, the Jiao clan's remnants had completely offended the Shifter Emperor Association. Those who didn't retreat from the northern frontier in time were all killed by the members of the Shifter Emperor Association. Those fellows in other regions were only having fun now. Once their resources were exhausted, it would only be a matter of time before they were completely wiped out. Winesword Mystery might not be interested in reviving the Jiao clan, but this didn't mean that he could tolerate others wantonly slaughtering his own clansmen. It was even more impossible for him to tolerate Ding Zai, the main culprit who had caused the Jiao clan's remnants to end up in such a state. If Winesword Mystery knew Ding Zai's identity, it wasn't impossible for him to draw his sword and kill Ding Zai. Lord Shifter Emperor need not worry too much. Ding Zai stretched out his hand and touched his nose. He smiled and said, "Your subordinate doesn't need any information. As long as I know the general situation, I can piece together some clues. Then, I can gather all these clues and know the result. Although it's not accurate, it's not far from it." Lin Yuan was once again choked by Ding Zai's words. But thinking about it, if Ding Zai's associative ability wasn't so rich, he wouldn't have been able to secretly plan a killing move against the Shifter Emperor Association and Lin Yuan under Lin Yuan's careful planning. Although it was all broken by Lin Yuan, and his identity was exposed, it was still much better than Lei Fan, who took advantage of Lin Yuan's absence to act recklessly. However, according to your subordinate's reliable information, when Kong Lezin just entered Shunning City, for some unknown reason, he suddenly changed his calm and collected manner. It is said that several inns in Shunning City were smashed by Kong Lezin. Your subordinate guesses that Kong Lezin must have had a conflict with Yang Qinglin, or some other existence, and even suffered a loss. As Ding Zai spoke, he once again spread out his hands and said, "Now what Lord Shifter Emperor should be dealing with is not Yang Qinglin, but Hu Yan. As far as I know, Hu Yan is extremely dissatisfied with your action of attacking the northern frontier families. He tried to persuade you but to no avail. He simply fell out with Li Zhong. At this time, he should have already begun to deal with Li Zhong." "Yes, I know." Lin Yuan nodded slightly, but there wasn't the slightest ripple in his different-colored eyes. Chapter 411. Undercurrents were surging under the northern frontier. On the surface, Hu Yan and Li Zhong were fighting. In the dark, the Shanglu Association, the Demon Emperor Association, the Four United Group, and even Yang Qinglin of the Divine Blood Sect were secretly plotting to get what they wanted. However, the Shenwu dynasty was not as peaceful as the northern frontier. Lei Qiusheng, who had been silent for nearly half a year, changed his declining trend. Shen Linjun, who had been hiding for years and only had the reputation of being an elite, brazenly moved out. In the first battle, they showed their edge to the world. 300,000 miles to the south of the imperial city, the rebel army formed by the big clans, even if there were dozens of times more than Shenlin-jun, was destroyed in a face-to-face confrontation. Hearing about the war in the south, millions of miles to the north of the imperial city were in a state of panic. Because of the existence of the northern frontier, not many people dared to rebel. After all, Lin Yuan chose to live with the light and dust when he was at his peak. No one knew what kind of secret agreement Lin Yuan had with Lei Qiusheng. They were all worried that they would be attacked by the Shenwu dynasty and the northern frontier if they took advantage of the chaos to raise their troops. Almost overnight, the situation changed drastically. All the rebel armies to the north of the imperial city either disbanded on the spot or fled at the sight of the wind. Those who usually boasted of being famous generals and ambitious people were scared witless. There was no lack of existences who went to the imperial city alone to confess to Lei Qiusheng. However, these people were too stupid. Although Lin Yuan took the opportunity to control the northern frontier first, he chose to be silent when the Shenwu dynasty was at its most chaotic instead of adding insult to injury. This would help Lei Qiusheng stabilize the situation as much as possible. Therefore, even if Lei Qiusheng was dissatisfied, he would not really fall out with Lin Yuan. Naturally, he would give the territory and try to satisfy Lin Yuan's conditions. Surrendering when you had a chance of winning and surrendering when you were forced into a corner were two different things. Therefore, most of the people who ran over to Lei Qiusheng out of fear and didn't know what to do had a good ending. Although Shenlin-jun had not yet covered the southern coastal region, the monsters under the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas had all ceased their activities. Back then, when Lei Qiusheng was sweeping the lands for the Wanjian dynasty, many demonic beasts from the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas had suffered losses at his hands. Now that Lei Qiusheng had changed his previous dejected appearance and directly sent out troops to sweep the lands, even those who did not know the cause of the chaos in the Shenwu dynasty could guess that Lei Qiusheng had probably solved the problem at hand and was about to settle the score. Not long ago, the world was still in chaos. However, the moment Lei Qiusheng made his move, the direction of the situation immediately changed. Some busybodies also specially analyzed the current situation. The chaos in the Shenwu dynasty would last for no more than 3 years. Now only Lin Yuan, Qingpeng Lei Qiuming, Frost Mirror Mahamu, and Qingjiang Sun Qianfan had the ability to wrestle with Lei Qiusheng at the northern frontier. They had both internal and external troubles. Except for these 4 forces, the rest of the rebel forces were just chickens and pottery dogs to Lei Qiusheng. At the same time, northern frontier, Shunning City's military camp. Lin Yuan straightened his body. His gaze fell on the 200,000 soldiers of the southern expedition who were performing martial arts on the drill ground. His heterochromatic eyes revealed a cold color. Although the 3 million soldiers of the southern expedition had not yet expanded to the point of being fully staffed, they had 3 million soldiers. Moreover, these soldiers who were recruited to the southern expedition were originally people who were unwilling to work in the northern frontier to support themselves. They were ruffians and scoundrels who spent all day on the streets. Now, under Li Zhongxing's command, they already had the shadow of a strong army. I didn't know that Lord Dragon King would come in person. Please excuse me for not going out to meet you. Li Zhongxing, who was wearing a silver-white armor, strode to Lin Yuan with 2 of his personal guards. He knelt on one knee and cupped his fists. Although Li Zhongxing's temperament was relatively simple, as a military seedling selected by Shenlin-jun, he was obviously not a kind person. After learning from Luo Su for a period of time, although Li Zhongxing was not as intolerant as before, he also maintained a tacit attitude towards some of the unspoken rules. He was clear in his rewards and punishments, and was cautious in his private matters. He could be considered a qualified commander, especially after the incident with Lei Fan. Although Li Zhongxing was wholeheartedly immersed in the military camp, he was no longer as ignorant as before about the situation in the northern frontier. He was very clear that Lin Yuan usually either cultivated near the demonic beast forest, or directly went to the northern frontier prince's mansion to explain some details and changes of the new policy. He would not stroll around. Therefore, when he knew that Lin Yuan appeared in the Southern Battlefront Army's military camp, Li Zhongxing put down the things at hand and hurried over. Li Zhongxing. Lin Yuan was still looking at the soldiers who were performing martial arts on the drill ground. This general is here. Li Zhongxing cupped his fists again and replied in a deep voice. I order you to lead the soldiers under your command out of Shunning Pass and clean up the rebels in the south. Return a peaceful land to the Xinwu dynasty. Lin Yuan's voice was very calm, as if he was just talking about a trivial matter. Li Zhongxing's body trembled as he looked at Lin Yuan's back in disbelief. Although they were far apart, and even the council of the Demon Emperor did not have any definite information, but now that the Xinwu dynasty had sent out troops to clean up the south, the news of the rebels fleeing at the mere sight of them was definitely not groundless. As the largest branch of the rebels, Lin Yuan was definitely not stupid enough to not be able to distinguish who was his enemy and naively think that his position was stable after the Xinwu dynasty had conferred him a title. At this time he was sending troops to the south to clean up the rebels. Could it be? It's as you think. This king wants to seize territory. If we don't seize this opportunity to seize territory, when the Xinwu dynasty stabilizes, we won't have enough trump cards to fall out with Lei Qiuxing. Secondly, even if Lei Qiuxing is afraid of us and won't do anything to us, he won't give us a chance to continue growing. Lin Yuan's voice was still calm. He just smiled and said, after this battle, I want to be the real king of the northern frontier. This general naturally understands the Dragon King's intention, but the soldiers under this general's command. Li Zhongxing looked worriedly at the soldiers practicing martial arts on the drill ground. A trace of hesitation flashed across his eyes. Lin Yuan wanted the most remote northern frontier, the northern part of the Xinwu dynasty. Before he saw the big river called Wei River that separated the imperial city from the north, he and his soldiers could not stop. A mere 3 million soldiers would definitely not be able to take over such a large territory and wipe out the rebels north of the Xinwu dynasty's imperial city. If the soldiers aren't good, then train them as you fight. If the soldiers aren't good enough, then recruit them as you fight. If you don't have enough soldiers, don't you still have the surrendered troops? Lin Yuan raised his eyelids and sneered. Don't tell me that you, Shin Lin Jun's reserve military officer, aren't as good at training soldiers as a bunch of temporary flower frames. Chapter 412. Lord Dragon King, do you trust me? Li Zhongxing's eyes widened as he stared at Lin Yuan, who had suddenly changed. He did not bother to hide the doubt in his eyes. Lei Fan was an existence that could be used in any position, but because of the matter of overstepping his authority, he was taken down by Lin Yuan. In the end, his corpse was hung at the mountain gate by the sect of the Blood God. For a general like him who only knew how to lead troops into battle, his position in Lin Yuan's heart naturally could not be compared to those all-rounders. Furthermore, this trip meant that he would be setting up his own territory. Even though the southern expedition had 3 million troops, once the battle was over, it was not impossible for him to have tens of millions of troops under his command. With so many soldiers and horses in his hands, as long as he has any little idea, it is enough to be a fatal blow to Lin Yuan. Furthermore, even if he did not have any thoughts that he should not have, so what? He was not some peerless general that only appeared once in 1,000 years. It was impossible for him to command tens of millions of troops as he wished. When the time came that Lin Yuan wished for, he could not even guarantee that all of his troops would abide by the rules. Furthermore, what about those troops who had surrendered to him because of their defeat? After being silent for a long time, Li Zhongxing still did not get a reply from Lin Yuan. When he raised his head again, he realized that Lin Yuan had left the stage. Army commander, can't you tell? Lord Dragon King, he is asking you to vacate your position. One of the 2 personal guards that Li Zhongxing brought along stroked his beard. A light flashed in his eyes as he said in a deep voice, the demonic beasts live in peace with the northern frontier. Therefore, the northern frontier does not need many troops now. 1 northern army is enough. Our southern expedition's establishment from the beginning was to scare some people in the south. Our initial goal has been achieved. Now that we are in need again, we will naturally play other roles. You mean? Li Zhongxing was reminded by his personal guard. He suddenly understood Lin Yuan's meaning. Of course, one of Lin Yuan's starting points was to seize territory, but the most important thing was to allow the southern expedition to set out and free up the camp to train another army. Recently, Lin Yuan had no intention to expand the army. Therefore, the new army that was about to occupy the southern expedition camp was only Li Zhong's fallen star army. In the northern frontier, Lord Li Zhong, the big shot who promoted the land reform, had the support of Lin Yuan and the elusive Yan Xingqi. Even in the Shunwu dynasty, there were many arrogant soldiers and generals from the fallen star army who were willing to help them. The starting point of this new army was much higher than theirs from the beginning. Isn't this too ridiculous? Li Zhongxing clenched his fists. His eyes were burning with anger. He said in a deep voice, "What does this Lin Yuan think the king of the northern frontier is?" After all, Li Zhongxing was born in the Shunlin Jun. Other than the daily training and military lessons, what he received the most was the loyalty that the instructors instilled in him. Therefore, Li Zhongxing and Zhang Qilin's generation were undoubtedly loyal to Lei Qiusheng. However, before they came to the northern frontier, they were ordered to be absolutely loyal to Lei Fan. After seeing the changes here, they felt that the path that Lin Yuan was taking was the right one. Moreover, with the imperial edict of the Shunwu dynasty, they suppressed the dissatisfaction in their hearts. However, there was a limit to how much they could tolerate Lin Yuan. Now that Lei Fan had passed away, and the northern frontier was on the right track, the first thing that Lin Yuan did was to get rid of the donkey after it had outlived its usefulness. He wanted to completely destroy the influence that the three words King of the Northern Frontier had on the northern frontier. What difference was there between such an action and tearing off the last piece of cloth that the empire was using? The personal guard who had spoken to advise Li Zhongxing quickly stepped forward and pressed down on Li Zhongxing's shoulder. He smiled bitterly and shook his head. Lowering his voice, he said, "Army commander, you can't do that. You should know the personality of that black Jiao. Once it has decided on something, it will not change its mind. If you plead for Hu Yan now, not only will you not be able to save Hu Yan, you will also be sacrificing yourself." Furthermore, hearing the personal guard's hesitation, Li Zhongxing frowned slightly and asked, "Furthermore what? This is my military camp. There won't be any spies from the Association of the Demon Emperor. If you have anything to say, just say it. Furthermore, that bastard Hu Yan has indeed gone a little overboard. Regarding the land reform in the northern frontier, even this subordinate feels that this is a good thing that will benefit the future. Without the control of the aristocratic families, the yearly income of the imperial residents will increase. With enough money and food, the imperial residents will be able to continue developing more land and provide for more people, making the entire northern frontier better and better. If the Black Jiao's policy can be implemented in the entire Shunwu dynasty, then after 2 or 3 generations, our Shunwu dynasty's national strength will definitely surpass the other 6 dynasties. Even if they pull in the Hengduan mountain range's demonic beasts, they won't be able to surpass us in economic and military strength. As the king of the northern frontier, Hu Yan must have seen this clearly. Otherwise, he wouldn't have agreed to implement the Black Jiao's new policy. However, although Hu Yan said so, he did something else. This subordinate heard that on the first day Li Zhong took office, Hu Yan wanted to hold a banquet and invite Li Zhong to introduce him to the masters of the aristocratic families. His purpose was to delay or even not implement this new policy. The personal guard bowed slightly with killing intent in his eyes. He said coldly, that Black Jiao as a demonic beast still knows to seek benefits for the people of the northern frontier. As the king of the northern frontier, Hu Yan only cares about the petty benefits of the aristocratic families. Based on this, Hu Yan deserves to die. But, Li Zhongxing opened his mouth, but his momentum weakened a bit. He said in a low voice, "I'm not talking about whether Hu Yan is right or wrong. Right now, the control of the northern frontier is getting weaker and weaker. If the Legion commander argues with the Black Jiao because of Hu Yan, it will only cause the Legion commander to be involved in this whirlpool. It won't do us any good. It's better to stay alive and wait for the Emperor's army to go north." Li Zhongxing crossed his arms in front of his chest and thought carefully for a moment. Suddenly, He shook his head and said helplessly, "Do you think that the Black Jiao will let go of us who are loyal to the Shenwu dynasty at this point? In any case, Hu Yan is still thinking about the benefits of his family. In the eyes of the Black Jiao, we are just a threat from the beginning to the end. I even think that the Black Jiao asked me to lead the troops to go south this time just to get rid of me." The personal guard was silent for a moment. Then he raised his head and said, "Legion Commander, this is indeed a crisis. With our ability, it's already hard for us to restrain the southern expedition. If we expand the battlefront to the whole north, it's already a blessing that the troops under our command don't take the opportunity to rebel. Therefore, whether we do well or not, the Black Jiao has a reason to punish us." But speaking of this, the personal guard changed the topic and sneered, "Isn't this also an opportunity?" He smiled bitterly and said, "Uncle, do you know that Dragon King has become a real god in the hearts of the northern frontier people? Ever since Dragon King took over the northern frontier, the aristocratic families and sects have been eating all they can. Now he has finally started to bring benefits to the people at the bottom. Do you know how those who refuse to carry out Dragon King's orders will be scolded if they don't carry out Dragon King's orders smoothly?" At this point, the young man of the Hu family spread out his hands and said helplessly, "I have already sent someone to inquire. The officers of the Southern Expedition Army have no way to refuse the Dragon King's order. They also asked me to come back and ask Uncle if Uncle has any way to stop the Southern Expedition Army from going to war. They will prepare generous gifts to thank Uncle." Bang! Hu Yan let go of his nephew and heavily punched the courtyard wall next to him. The thick wall immediately spread out a large area of cracks like a spider web. He originally thought that Lin Yuan didn't have any intention of denouncing him for such a long time because he didn't intend to interfere in the battle between him and Li Zhongxing. However, just as he thought of seeking outside help, Lin Yuan directly took drastic measures and transferred the southern expedition away. He couldn't even take advantage of the situation. Li Zhongxing, that little thief, knows how to play safe. He has dug a pit for me. Hu Yan roared with scarlet eyes. If Li Zhongxing took the southern expedition away from the northern frontier, it meant that he had left the supervision of the association of the Demon Emperor and Lin Yuan. As the saying goes, a general can't obey the emperor's orders when he is outside. Even if Li Zhongxing took his people to the Shenwu dynasty, Lin Yuan couldn't do anything to him. However, as the king of the northern region, he was ordered not to let his guards step out of Shunning City. He could go out by himself, but once he left Shunning City, which was still safe for now, who knew what those madmen from the Fallen Star Army would do to him? The king of the northern region in name but not in reality. Where is the champion of the Fallen Star Army, General Gao? Suddenly, a thunderous voice exploded in the sky. Hu Yan raised his head subconsciously, only to see the famous vice president of the Association of the Demon Emperor, Ding Zai, floating in the air, looking down at Shunning City with his hands behind his back. Hu Yan's heart sank again. After all, before this, Ding Zai had always presented himself as a trash. No matter how hard he cultivated, Ding Zai's talent in cultivation was too poor. But now, Ding Zai was floating in the air without any signs of strain. This was enough to show that Ding Zai's cultivation was at least at the Heaven Dipper realm. "I'm here." A muffled voice suddenly came from the villa belonging to Li Zhong in the northern frontier palace. Then a burly figure like a titan shot out from the villa and rushed to Ding Zai in the air. "Under the order of the Dragon King, the Northern Frontier Army will set off soon. The empty camp will be handed over to your Fallen Star Army to manage. As long as it doesn't affect the development of the Northern Frontier, you can recruit as many soldiers as you want. This is the decree of the Dragon King. Take it to the King of the Northern Frontier and print it. Then go to the camp outside the city to report." Ding Zai calmly handed over a white piece of paper to Gao Buzhen. Then he turned around and disappeared from the sky above Shunning City, as if he had never appeared. "Congratulations, Uncle. The Fallen Star Army has been transferred away from Li Zhong by the Dragon King. For Uncle, this is great news." The disciple of the Hu family cupped his fists to Hu Yan and sneered. "Without the help of the Fallen Star Army, Li Zhong is just a weak scholar no matter how powerful he is. By then, I have many ways to stop Li Zhong's order from going out of Shunning City. Bastard! Hu Yan suddenly growled and said coldly, "You know, this time, the Dragon King is seeking benefits for the people. We just delayed Li Zhong's order, but there are already people complaining about the Northern Frontier Palace. If Li Zhong's order can't even go out of Shunning City, will the people be angry? Will the Dragon King punish us? Aren't you giving them a reason to kill me? Use your brain before you speak." Chapter 414. Yes, Lord Uncle. The Hu clan disciple covered his face and took a deep breath. His eyes suddenly flashed with a cold light, and he suggested again, "Since we can't stop Li Zhong's decree, then we have to think of a way to kill Li Zhong. Now that the land reform has begun to be implemented in various places, even if Lord Dragon King personally says it, those people won't be willing to give up halfway. So once Li Zhong dies, Lord Dragon King can only let Lord Uncle take full responsibility for this matter in a short period of time. At that time, Pa." This time, the Hu clan disciple's response was not Hu Yan's angry roar, but a loud slap. "Then your uncle, I, will be pushed from being the support and leader of countless aristocratic families in the northern frontier to being the enemy of the aristocratic families in an instant. Not to mention whether Lord Dragon King has other backup plans after Li Zhong's death. Even if he doesn't have any preparations and can only leave this matter to me, do you think he won't supervise me and let me do whatever I want? Moreover, Li Zhong inexplicably died in the northern frontier prince's mansion. Do you believe that when this matter is settled, the Hu clan will die the same way as Li Zhong died?" Hu Yan took a deep breath. Although he had long known that the Hu clan's juniors were good-for-nothings, he really didn't expect that at this time. The Hu clan's juniors still didn't realize the seriousness of the problem. They thought that if they were in Li Zhong's position, they could do whatever they wanted just like before, and even change the order from day to night. Then, Lord Uncle's meaning is? After the Hu clan disciple was beaten, he also knew that his smarts had completely angered the fetters. Originally, he wanted to show off his abilities, but now he could only cover his face and stand beside Hu Yan with a wronged expression, carefully asking a question. Hu Yan took a deep breath, narrowed his eyes and said, "The situation has already reached this point. No matter what we think, Li Zhong won't let this matter rest. I admit that the annual income of the northern frontier's farmland added together can't compare to the several large contracts we have in the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. However, the land is the foundation of our aristocratic family's existence. Without the land, the aristocratic families are just a group of worms that can be bullied by others." Hu Yan had some more words that he couldn't say in person. If the northern frontier aristocratic family's juniors were all talents like the Qiao clan's juniors, Hu Yan wouldn't be so opposed to the reform of the northern frontier aristocratic families. However, Hu Yan had seen the performance of his nephews. It was fine if he was alive, but once his generation of Hu clan members died, his juniors would be sensible if they didn't cause the Hu clan to be ruined. Although the annual income from the land wasn't much, as the northern frontier's territory grew larger, this income would not only remain unchanged, but would also increase. If they could stop Lin Yuan's land reform plan, no matter how bad the Hu clan's juniors were, they could still survive for 4 or 5 more generations. If they could produce 1 or 2 more Kirin, the Hu clan might be able to avoid the fate of being ruined. Relying on this group of juniors to beg for food in the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce? It would be better to hope that money would fall from the sky. After thinking for a moment, Hu Yan slowly said, "Go to all the aristocratic families and tell them that I will be hosting a banquet in the Hu clan tonight. I invite all the family heads to come." The ability of the royal guards was only useful in Shunning City. Now that the southern expedition was about to set off, if Hu Yan didn't make a last stand before Li Zhongxing left, she would have no chance at all. Yes. The Hu clan's juniors cupped their fists at Hu Yan and responded with a heavy voice. At the same time, outside the Hu clan, Xia Siyu curled his lips proudly and said to Xiaoan, "See? I told you that Hu Yan wouldn't wait for his death when he has completely lost the ability to resist. He must be asking his descendants to inform the patriarchs of the various aristocratic families to gather at the Hu residence and join forces to put pressure on the demon emperor." Shaowen's face remained cold as he stared expressionlessly at the Hu clan disciples who were gradually disappearing into the distance. After a long while, a cold glint flashed across his eagle-like eyes as he asked, "Kill them? What's the point of killing him? It's a waste of time and useless." Xia Siyu waved his right hand, and a heavy black money bag appeared in his hand. He said with a smile, "If you agree to a bet, you must accept your loss. This is what you lost to me. Don't kill him? Then why did you call us here?" Shaowen narrowed his eyes slightly and turned his head to look at Xia Siyu beside him, a dangerous cold light flashing in his eyes. Since joining Lin Yuan's forces, the lives of the demi-humans had indeed improved a lot. After all, the forces under Lin Yuan's command were a mix of good and bad. There were demon beasts, humans, and demi-humans. Compared to humans, the demon beasts in the Hengduan mountain range were more likely to accept these demi-humans. Therefore, during this period of time, the demi-humans could finally raise their heads in the Hengduan mountain range. It was many times better than the previous situation where they were hated by both gods and demons. Of course, to guard against civil unrest in Shunning City, Xia Siyu still didn't look serious, but looking at the direction where the Hu clan's disciples had disappeared, his eyes revealed a playful look. Some people were on the chessboard from the beginning. No matter how they struggled, they couldn't escape the fate of being a chess piece. After all, not everyone was qualified to be a chess player. Even a ruthless person like Lei Fan only dared to have some bold ideas about the power of the northern frontier when Lin Yuan was in danger. The head of the Hu clan was really strong-willed. He had just learned a lesson from Hu Yan, but when it was his turn, he dared to go against Lin Yuan for a little benefit. Tonight would be the end of this show. Those heads of the aristocratic families who had rushed to Shunning City from all over the northern frontier to wait for the news could still keep their lives if they didn't go to the Hu clan tonight. But if they went to the Hu clan, we're leaving too. The men of the Northern Army stationed near Shunning City alone can't handle tonight's big show. Xia Siyu whistled, and 7 or 8 figures disappeared in a flash, hiding in the darkness. When these hidden sentries disappeared, Li Zhong, who was dressed in white, walked to the side of the two. His clear eyes were cold and sharp as he said, "Some people are always above the people and think that they are the power. Tonight I will show these idiots what real power is." Mr. Li. Xia Siyu and Shaowen cupped their fists at Li Zhong at the same time. Although they didn't know what was so great about this young man in white, but to be entrusted with such an important task by the Demon Emperor, he must be outstanding in some aspects. Thinking of the arrangement tonight, Xia Siyu, who knew some inside information, felt his hair stand on end. Chapter 4:15. It was night. The heads of the aristocratic families from all over the northern frontier gathered in the Hu mansion. They looked at the luxurious dishes on the table, but not a single guest picked up their chopsticks. Almost everyone looked at Hu Yan, who was sitting on the main seat. They wanted to hear what the king of the northern frontier, who was in the camp of the northern frontier prince, had to say. Hu Yan put a piece of fresh fish into his mouth and chewed for a moment. Then he wiped his mouth and said in a deep voice, "You have come from afar. As the king of the northern frontier, I have not done my duty as a host. It is a sin. Today, I have prepared some wine to welcome you." After he finished speaking, the hall was still silent. Everyone fixed their eyes on Hu Yan. They came to the northern frontier to ask for accurate information. There had to be an explanation about the northern frontier prince's mansion attacking them. "King of the northern frontier, you know better than anyone why we are gathered here. Don't play tricks. If you think you can send us home by talking, I advise you to go to bed early. You can have anything in your dreams." The one who spoke was a middle-aged man around the age of 40. His skin was dark, and his forehead was full. He didn't look like the patriarch of an aristocratic family that lived like a prince. Instead, he looked like a valiant general that often fought on the battlefield. Especially his muscles that couldn't be hidden by his luxurious brocade robe. It was enough to make some women who were like wolves and tigers stare at him for a long time. Hu Yan nodded slightly and said with narrowed eyes, "Of course I know why you have come to Shunning City. But if I say that I can send you away by talking, I may be telling the truth. Let me ask you, How many of you have made up your mind to fall out with the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion and dare to take the risk of angering the Dragon King to deal with Li Zhong? After Hu Yan finished speaking, the audience started to talk. Everyone was whispering, but no one dared to answer Hu Yan's question. Why did they dare to come to Shunning City to ask for information after the prince's mansion at the northern frontier began to clear the land? Why did they even obstruct and bribe the secretaries and guards who were sent out by Li Zhong? This was because Lin Yuan had no intention of killing these aristocratic families. The aristocratic families were at loggerheads with the northern frontier prince's residents on the issue of land. This was mainly because they had been thinking of ways to reduce the dynasty's income to fill their own pockets for so many years. They didn't have the right to speak in the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. Even though he had become the president, Lin Yuan had the final say on how many feis the Hengduan mountain range would be allocated every day. When the various caravans left the Shunning Pass, they would still have the final say on how many things they could bring and how much tax they had to pay. Although the degree of freedom was extremely low, the aristocratic families were still willing to endure the northern frontier's fey trade. However, the issue of land was more sensitive because after losing these lands, the aristocratic family's annual fixed income would decrease. It was still fine for the aristocratic families that raised many serfs, but for the aristocratic families that didn't raise serfs, they had to keep their own cultivated land. If the land was abandoned, they would have to pay taxes to the northern frontier prince's residents every year. After all, this was the aristocratic family's obligation and the foundation of their survival. Otherwise, how could the various dynasties allow the aristocratic families to exist like local emperors? Wasn't it because they could organize the farmers to cultivate and not waste a large amount of land? But now, the northern frontier prince's residence was just fooling around. First, they took drastic measures to get all the farmers to cultivate in the new gathering land. After clearing out the land, the aristocratic families would have to pay taxes. They couldn't possibly point at their own fertile land and say that it was all wasteland, right? They could either pinch their noses and admit defeat and pay taxes to the northern frontier prince's residents every year when there was no income from the cultivated land, or they could be honest and hand over their land to the northern frontier prince's residents. Although they could earn a lot of wealth through the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, it wasn't a long-term solution. Not every aristocratic family was like the Qiao clan and had strict requirements for their descendants. Those young masters and young ladies in their families were not all good-for-nothings, but if they were really forced to do business, they would at least have to be prepared to lose everything for a few years. Only after they had suffered enough losses could they be considered qualified businessmen. Look, all of you are mute. I know that all of you are just angry, so you want to gather in Shunning City and see if you can put pressure on the Northern Frontier Prince's residence and ask Lord Dragon King to revoke this decree, right? Hu Yan sneered and said coldly, "Then you have the wrong idea. To be honest, clearing out the land is only the first step of Li Zhong's plan. Next, he will ask the aristocratic families and farmers to pay the same taxes in the future, which is a 50% tax. Whoever has more land will pay more in the future, and whoever has less land will still have to suffer this cut." Boom. Hu Yan's words were like a heavy bomb, and the whole Hu residence was as noisy as a market. The aristocratic families that were doing the worst paid 50% tax to the government every year. The aristocratic families that were doing well in the northern frontier didn't pay much. Other than the Qiao clan, who only paid 10% tax, there were many aristocratic families that paid 20% or 30% tax. Moreover, they had the most land. Now that there were no farmers to cultivate the land, they had to pinch their noses and swallow bitter medicine to pay the tax. If the tax rate was raised again, how could they survive? More importantly, the Northern Frontier Prince's residence's arrangement for the farmers was simply forcing them into a dead end. As long as the farmers were willing to cultivate the land, they could go to the newly established settlement and obtain a much larger land than before based on their ability and population. In addition, the Northern Frontier Prince's residence had issued a decree that as long as the farmers cultivated the new land, they only needed to pay 20% tax for 10 years. Although after 10 years they had to pay the same 50% tax to the aristocratic families as they did to the northern frontier princes' residents, the land they obtained from the northern frontier princes' residents was much larger than their original land. It was still a profitable business. In this era, the people at the lowest level didn't even have enough to eat. Otherwise, they wouldn't have sent the land passed down from their ancestors to the aristocratic families for a little tax reduction. Although there was no contract, in name, they had turned from free farmers to serfs of the aristocratic families. Therefore, the problem that the people of the northern frontier thought of was very simple. They didn't care whether the land they cultivated belonged to them, the aristocratic families, or the northern frontier princes' residents. As long as the food that fell into their hands after the annual harvest was more than before, it was fine. Therefore, it was impossible for the aristocratic families to do better than the northern frontier princes' residents in terms of welfare. Even if they suppressed 10% or 20% of the tax, it would only be considered as a stopgap and definitely not a profit. Chapter 416. Moreover, the descendants of the northern frontier aristocratic families looked down on these farmers. Even if they didn't have a contract, these farmers were often taken advantage of by the aristocratic families for the sake of their reputation. Therefore, there was a lot of resentment between the two parties. However, these farmers didn't dare to say anything in the past, so there wasn't any conflict. Now that there was another way to feed their families, these farmers wouldn't be willing to mix with the aristocratic families even if they didn't want the land that was passed down from their ancestors. Even if the aristocratic families were willing to give up their profits, it wasn't something that could be solved with just a 10% or 20% tax deduction. If they wanted to keep these farmers, they would have to offer a greater discount than the northern frontier princes' residents. In other words, if the northern frontier princes' residents only collected 20% tax for the first 10 years, they would be exempt from the tax. In the future, if the northern frontier princes' residents raised the tax to 50%, they would only be able to collect 20% tax. However, if they turned around, they would have to give 50% of the income from the farmland to the northern frontier princes' residents. If the income from the land wasn't enough, then they would have to fork out their own money and grain to make up for it. Although everyone present was the head of a large family, it would be fine if they had to live like this for a year or two, but who would be able to stand it after a long time? Even if they had a mountain of gold, they couldn't just sit around and eat until it ran out. Even if they could get a decent amount of income from the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce every year, their lifeline was in the hands of others. If they casually found a reason to stop them, such as not giving them goods or restricting their caravan from leaving the country, they would come looking for trouble if they couldn't settle the debt. According to the rules of the Shenwu dynasty, although the aristocratic families could annex land, they were not allowed to lose any of the land under their name unless it was handed over to the local government. Unless there was an unstoppable natural disaster, the crime of losing the land was the same as a general losing a battle and losing a city. The best result would be the execution of the family head, confiscation of the property, and exile of the entire family. Head of the Hu family, you are the king of the northern frontier. Are you going to just watch that brat Li Zhong do whatever he wants? A head of an aristocratic family who weighed close to 150 kilograms choked and said with a gloomy gaze, "Don't forget, although you are the king of the northern frontier, your Hu family is still an aristocratic family in the northern frontier. We don't have to say which side you should sit on, right?" Bang. Hu Yan slammed the teacup in his hand onto the table and looked coldly at the fatty. He growled, "Isn't it obvious who this Hu favors? If it weren't for this Hu's words today, you would still be foolishly guarding your own land. Only after the northern frontier prince's estate has squeezed all the profits dry will you realize that you've suffered a great loss." Logically speaking, although Hu Yan's performance was strong enough, these family heads were also shrewd people. They naturally knew that Hu Yan had gathered all of them here, because he had a request. Therefore, each of them gave Hu Yan a cold shoulder, just so that their family could put in less effort. However, this fatty obviously did not know how to control his strength. He slapped his palm directly on Hu Yan's reverse scale. Everyone knew that Hu Yan, the king of the northern frontier, was just a figurehead who was not even as good as Lei Fan. In any case, Lei Fan still had the Northern Frontier Guard Army in his hands. Moreover, he was from the Lei family. All the forces in the northern frontier had to give Lei Fan some face. In the eyes of Lin Yuan, Lei Fan was like an ant. He could kill him as he wished. Now in Hu Yan's hands, other than the Hu family, there were only 100,000 princes' guards. Moreover, no one knew how many of these 100,000 princes' guards were spies of the Demon Emperor Association. Figurehead was the synonym of Hu Yan. However, Hu Yan was from the Hu family and had inherited the title of Shunning City's city lord. His talent was not bad. Other than being suppressed by Lin Yuan and Lei Fan, he was also a proud and arrogant person. This fatty immediately criticized Hu Yan, but he had touched Hu Yan's bottom line. This was because his words were more or less criticizing Hu Yan for not putting in effort for the family, and had always stood on the side of the northern frontier prince's mansion. Even his tone was somewhat harsh. However, they all knew that Hu Yan was the one who had put in the most effort in this incident. At this point, to say that Hu Yan did not put in effort was equivalent to pointing at Hu Yan's nose and calling him a useless person. Hu Yan's sudden outburst immediately caused everyone to keep quiet out of fear. Each and every one of them looked at Hu Yan with their mouths agape. After a while, the patriarchs of the aristocratic families acted as if nothing had happened just now. They began to toast each other, and the atmosphere of joy and laughter was restored in a short time. They were all trying to suppress this fatty's mistake openly and covertly. Humph. Hu Yan snorted coldly and shifted his gaze away from the fatty. He said in a deep voice, "Everyone's mouth is unforgiving, but in your hearts, you all know that in order to stop this new set of policies, this Hu had to shed all pretense of cordiality with all the officials in the northern frontier prince's mansion. But there was no other choice. Li Zhong has the backing of Lord Dragon King. With just this Hu's strength, how can I be a match for that guy? I ask everyone to lend me a hand. Family head who must be joking." A young man dressed in a scholarly robe stood up and cupped his hands towards Hu Yan. He sneered and said, "My Wang family is in the northern frontier. Although we are not considered a big family, we are still very clear about the matter of being loyal to the emperor. It's just some land. If Lord Dragon King likes it, he can take it. My Wang family will never do anything to betray Lord Dragon King." What a nice way to put it. Isn't it because you are afraid? The plump family head from before snorted coldly and said sarcastically, "If your Wang family really doesn't care, why did you come all the way to Shunning City? Could it be that you are here to freeload off family head whose banquet today?" When the arrow was on the bow, some people flinched at the last moment, and some people were provoked. Naturally, there were differences in opinion. After all the people gathered here were the family heads of various aristocratic families. Naturally, there was no such thing as a spy of the Demon Emperor. Moreover, since Hu Yan had issued the invitation for this banquet, he would naturally make preparations in advance. Otherwise, wouldn't it be awkward if the infamous Dragon King suddenly appeared in the middle of the meeting? Anyway, Lord Dragon King couldn't hear it, so it didn't matter if his tone was a little harsh. Those who walk different paths cannot work together. The young man surnamed Wang's fair face turned pale. Obviously, he was angry and ashamed. However, at this moment, he also knew that this was not a place where he could act wantonly. He cupped his hands towards the plump family head and said in a deep voice, "Once again, this Wang wishes all the family heads to have their wishes come true. Forgive me for not keeping you company. Goodbye." Wait. The fat man opened his mouth again. That mouth of his seemed to only know how to offend people. He said coldly, "If you go out like this, who can guarantee that you won't report us to the Wang family in the northern frontier? Do you think that at this point, anyone who wants to quit can do so?" Chapter 417. What do you want to do? The young man surnamed Wang's expression became increasingly unsightly. Each aristocratic family was like a local tyrant in their own territory. Even if the scale was different, no aristocratic family would really be afraid of other aristocratic families, especially in their own territory. For these aristocratic families, besides Lin Yuan, Only the 1,000-year-old Xiao family could truly make them feel reverence. Being able to appear in Shunning City as the representative of the Wang family, the young man surnamed Wang naturally had a lot of authority in the Wang family. Now that he was forced into a dead end by the other party, he naturally could not take the same attitude as before. There were so many people present. Of course, the young man surnamed Wang was not the only one who wanted to retreat. It was just that before he spoke, these people were still hesitating in their hearts. Not many people were willing to fall out with Lin Yuan for the sake of their own land, but the fate of the sects and forces was obvious. They were more worried that once the aristocratic families fell apart, they would be completely wiped out by the northern frontier prince's mansion. Stirring up conflict at this time was the most foolish thing to do. Soon, a fair-skinned fat middle-aged man came out with a smile to smooth things over. He said, "Since Master who invited us here, he must have his own ideas. Otherwise, why would he come here to fan the flames? The northern frontier prince's mansion hasn't made a move yet. Do you think we can start fighting among ourselves first?" As his voice fell, even the hostile young man surnamed Wang and the plump master of the heavenly court paused. At this juncture, it would be the biggest joke if they started a fight with their own people. Although there were some differences in their attitudes towards the northern frontier prince's mansion, they were all members of aristocratic families, and their interests were the same. "Is that right, Master Hu?" The fair-skinned fat master of the heavenly court saluted Hu Yan, thinking that Hu Yan was too blind. No matter what the northern frontier prince's mansion was planning, the aristocratic families of the northern frontier must now unite. Otherwise, with the strength of one family alone, there was absolutely no way to fight against the northern frontier prince's mansion. But if they united, although there was still a great disparity in strength, at least they could ensure that the land issue would not be solved by force, and they would have space to move. My idea is very simple." Hu Yan narrowed his eyes slightly and said coldly, "Let's join forces and put pressure on the northern frontier prince's residence. Lord Dragon King is very busy during this period. The southern expedition is about to set out to sweep away the rebels nearby. The Fallen Star Army is also going to move into the southern expedition and start recruiting. Also, the Demon Emperor Association and the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce have many minor details that need to be changed. Lord Dragon King is not free. Our opponent from the very beginning is only Li Zhong." The family heads looked at each other in dismay. They did want to join forces to put pressure on the northern frontier prince's mansion, but they did not have any clue at the moment. After all, they did not intend to fall out with the northern frontier prince's mansion at all. Naturally, they could not use those insidious tricks in the past. Therefore, it was quite difficult to control the scale. "Don't worry, everyone. Since I dared to invite you here, I have made full preparations. I have also prepared a plan for how to put pressure on the northern frontier prince. After today's banquet, you will go back to your own territories and think of ways to do something about the farmland and population. Then, write a letter of impeachment and send it to the northern frontier prince's mansion. For example, the secretaries of the Qingzhong land and the soldiers of the Fallen Star Army have been accumulating wealth and raping women in the northern region for their own personal gains. That is why the people in the northern region have no way of making a living, and there have even been cases of murder. You have already exhausted your brains just to maintain the stability of the northern region. You don't have the energy to do anything else. Remember, in the letter of complaint that you send to the northern frontier prince's mansion, you must write that these secretaries and soldiers will be severely punished. At the same time, you will find a way to detain them first, and then pour the dirty water on them. At that time, I will send people to investigate. Then, both sides will work together and directly kill him. Even if we can't bring down Li Zhong, we can still cut off his henchmen. After this group of people is dealt with, he will definitely send his men out to clear the land. Therefore, if he wants to use people, he can only use my people." Hu Yan reached out and patted his chest. The smile on his face gradually became wilder and wilder. He said in a cold voice, "When my men go to clear the land, we will have the final say on how much fertile land and how much wasteland there is. When Li Zhong fails his task, the Dragon King will definitely be angry. Although he won't kill Li Zhong, he will definitely hand this matter over to other capable subordinates. Hu Yan's idea was very simple. Since they couldn't bring down Li Zhong directly, then they would just cut off Li Zhong's henchmen. When Li Zhong had no one to rely on, even if Lin Yuan still wanted to use Li Zhong to handle this matter, he wouldn't have the ability to do so. And for the heads of these aristocratic families, it was also a matter of ease for them to detain the officials of various government offices. They didn't even need to discuss the process carefully. This series of operations could be carried out perfectly. As long as the secret wasn't leaked in advance, Hu Yan couldn't think of any reason why this plan would fail. This method is not bad, but isn't the risk a little too high? This time, the one who spoke was still the head of the Heavenly Court. Obviously, on this issue he wasn't on the same side as Hu Yan. He pondered for a moment and said with a cold gaze, "Although I believe that head whose side is very clean, at least for now, there aren't any spies of the Association of the Demon Emperor. But who can guarantee that when we go back, our side will be clean as well? Once the Association of the Demon Emperor reports what we have done to Lord Dragon King, I don't think we have any way to survive. The Association of the Demon Emperor is just a bunch of lackeys." The fatty who offended the others said again, "This isn't the first time this old man has dealt with the Association of the Demon Emperor. These guys aren't people who are loyal to Lord Dragon King. They care more about their own interests. If you are afraid that your actions will be leaked, you can send a large amount of money to the Association of the Demon Emperor's branch presidents. Not only can this guarantee that the plan will be foolproof, it's even possible for the Association of the Demon Emperor to assist you in this matter." As soon as the fatty finished speaking, the group of family heads started whispering again. Obviously, the Association of the Demon Emperor wasn't loyal to Lin Yuan. As long as there were enough benefits, they could be controlled. This was an open secret to the entire northern frontier. But at this moment, obviously no one thought that what they saw was what Lin Yuan wanted them to see. Even if the Demon Emperor was really as they imagined, the benefits they offered wouldn't be more than what the northern frontier Wang residents offered. Happy National Day to everyone! Chapter 418. That's true, but, the head of the Heavenly Court opened his mouth again and said in a deep voice, "Even if we topple Li Zhong, what's the use? The problem of the aristocratic families in the northern frontier is a problem that Lord Dragon King wants to solve. Even if we topple Li Zhong, there will still be Wang Zhong and Zhao Zhong to do it. We took such a big risk to do this. Is it just to delay our deaths?" Everyone fell silent again and looked at Hu Yan anxiously, because what he said was indeed reasonable. Everyone took such a big risk to do this. Once it was found out, it would give the northern frontier prince's residents a legitimate reason to eradicate them. But in the end, the results still did not change. The biggest beneficiary might be Hu Yan, because Li Zhong was Hu Yan's #1 political enemy. After he was eradicated, Hu Yan would still be a puppet, but at least a puppet with more power. Those officials who came later would more or less be afraid of Hu Yan. "Brother Zhang, you're right. It's His Majesty the Dragon King's will to clear the land in the northern region. No matter who comes here, we have to follow his orders. But now, Li Zhong is sitting in this position, and it's obvious to all of you that he's not even willing to spare time to have a meal with us. This guy is bent on taking back the land in our hands. I don't mean to say this, but even if you're willing to give Li Zhong great wealth, he won't be willing to accept these benefits, right? But if someone else sits in Li Zhong's position, he knows that the first condition to do this well is that we aristocratic families cooperate with him. Otherwise, he will collapse in the same way that Li Zhong collapsed. Unless Lord Dragon King directly uses force to eradicate the aristocratic families in the northern frontier, the result will not change. So this new guy, no matter what he is thinking, has to give us face. When the time comes, everyone can show off their skills to please each other. At least on the land clearance issue, everyone will have room to maneuver. At least, you will not be killed directly and have no chance to make a comeback. Moreover, to put it bluntly, I Hu Yan am the king of the northern frontier in name, but in fact, I am just a puppet. So whether Li Zhong falls or not, it has nothing to do with me. I do these things and say these things because I am also a member of the aristocratic families. Of course, I also have to figure out the intentions of my superiors. Otherwise, one day, if I make an unintentional mistake, I will end up with my head separated from my body. So according to my speculation, once Li Zhong falls, the new person who will take over is most likely me. Because my superiors can't bear to see me having influence in the northern frontier. Now my biggest reliance is actually all of you, who are also aristocratic families. If I am in charge of this matter, no matter the result is good or bad, I will definitely be at odds with all of you. Looking at this matter from my superior's point of view, I am the most suitable person to take over Li Zhong. Similarly, if I am in charge of this matter, then there will be more room for you to maneuver. As long as we can make a good show, this set of government decrees can be postponed indefinitely. Hu Yan reached out and patted his chest, taking on the responsibility of everything, and said, even if it can't be postponed indefinitely, there will definitely be no problem for 30 to 50 years. At that time, with everyone's intelligence and wisdom, can't you find another way out? Hu Yan's words could be said to be quite reasonable and quite tempting. To put it bluntly, it was hard to say if the current northern frontier regime could still exist for 30 to 50 years. With Lei Qiuxing's tyrannical personality, if it wasn't for the fact that he was helpless, he definitely wouldn't allow someone else to sleep beside him. Once the Xinwu dynasty swept away the surrounding rebellions, the first thing they would do would be to make an example out of the northern frontier. He wouldn't allow the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce to continue controlling the price of the phase of the Xinwu dynasty. Even if the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce still existed, it should be surnamed Lei. Therefore, 30 to 50 years later, even if they couldn't find another way out, without Lin Yuan suppressing them, they could continue to maintain the current situation. They would still be the dominant aristocratic family in the northern frontier. Puffed. A sneer suddenly sounded at an inappropriate time. Everyone turned their heads with cold gazes, only to discover that the sneer came from Qiao Yilin. Qiao Yilin put down the chopsticks in his hand and elegantly wiped the grease at the corner of his mouth. He cupped his hands and said, "My apologies. Because this is a banquet hosted by the northern frontier, this one was still fantasizing about some exotic delicacies, so I came on an empty stomach. Previously, when everyone was talking loudly, this one was still busy filling my stomach and really didn't hear what everyone was saying." At this point, Qiao Yilin stood up and looked coldly at all the family heads present. He said in a cold voice, "I'll have to trouble everyone to repeat what you said earlier about not having a ruler and not having a father." As Qiao Yilin stood up, the heads of the 10 or so families affiliated with the Qiao family at the same table also stood up, including Shui Yan, who had a good personal relationship with Lin Yuan after the trip to the secret territory. A mere 10 or so people looked at the hundreds of people in the courtyard, revealing an aura of disdain for the world, as if the family heads in this courtyard were all clay chickens and pottery dogs. Thump. Seeing Qiao Yilin and Shui Yan take the lead in opposing, everyone's heart suddenly sank. The Qiao family and Shui family were on good terms with Lin Yuan. Previously, Qiao Yilin didn't say anything, so everyone instinctively thought that Hu Yan didn't invite this leading figure of the northern frontier family. It wasn't until now that Qiao Yilin suddenly spoke that everyone realized that the Qiao family and Shui family were on the side of the northern frontier prince's residence from the beginning. Qiao Yilin, others may be afraid of you, but I'm not. Hu Yan swallowed a mouthful of saliva and forced himself to calm down as he spoke. Of course you're not afraid of me. You're the prince of the northern frontier. Even if I had the guts as big as the sky, I wouldn't dare to kill you. Qiao Yilin crossed his arms in front of his chest and looked mockingly at Hu Yan. He said in a low voice, "However, the prince's residence guards are really strong. To be able to hold on until now without having their gates breached." "What breaching the gates? What are you talking about?" Hu Yan's eyes widened as he growled, "Qiao Yilin, I know that you're on good terms with His Excellency the Dragon King, but as the leader of the Northern Frontier family, you should know that once the series of land clearing decrees are completed, everyone will suffer a huge loss. And your Qiao family, as the #1 family on the Northern Frontier, will bear the brunt of this. I advise you to think carefully about which side you should stand on." Everyone's hearts finally relaxed a little. No matter how good the Qiao family and Shui family's relationship with Lin Yuan, they were still members of the Northern Frontier family. Just like Hu Yan, the prince of the Northern Frontier, when Lin Yuan wanted to implement the land clearing decrees on the Northern Frontier, he also resolutely chose to stand on the side of the family. Chapter 419. While the undercurrent was surging in the Hu clan's courtyard, Lin Yuan, who was observing the progress of Li Zhong's work in the prince's residence at the Northern Frontier, suddenly raised his head. His gaze paused on Li Zhong for a moment, before Li Zhong understood, and led his subordinates out of the courtyard where he worked. After everyone had left, a figure wearing a moon-white brocade robe and a black fox fur cloak slowly appeared. That jade-like face looked even whiter under the moonlight. There wasn't even the slightest trace of blood in it, making it look a little demonic. Even though it was the first time they had met, Lin Yuan quickly realized that this somewhat demonic-looking man was Zhang Xiu, the head of the embroidered uniform guard, the head of the Xinwu dynasty's secret service, who made countless people tremble in fear upon hearing his name. Lord Dragon King, this is the first time we've met. Please accept this humble gift as a token of my respect. Zhang Xiu bowed slightly and casually tossed out a brocade box. It accurately landed on the ground 3 feet in front of Lin Yuan. Due to the collision, the contents of the brocade box clearly shook a few times. Very quickly, blood seeped out from the bottom of the brocade box. Lin Yuan's multicolored eyes focused slightly. A wave of demonic power flashed past, and the brocade box shattered into pieces, revealing a head that had died with remaining grievances. It was the young lieutenant of the Ether Association. That hideous face that had died with remaining grievances was filled with resentment and unwillingness. However, other than a neat cut on his neck, there were no other injuries. It was obvious that this fellow had died at the hands of an expert in the art of the blade. Moreover, the other party had revealed his identity and purpose for coming. Furthermore, the moment the young lieutenant's expression had changed, he had drawn his blade and killed him. Then he had placed the head in a brocade box and presented it to Lin Yuan. Lord Zhang, are you demonstrating your power to this king? Lin Yuan's multicolored eyes remained slightly narrowed, but the killing intent on his body surged out like a river. I wouldn't dare. I'm just cleaning up the ranks. My embroidered uniform guard has never needed incompetent subordinates, much less useless trash. Zhang Xiu smiled faintly and received all of Lin Yuan's killing intent. However, he did not reveal any strange expression. Without waiting for Lin Yuan to speak again, Zhang Xiu straightened his clothes and said indifferently, I came to the Northern Frontier on His Majesty's orders. After all, you went overboard in the Northern Frontier. First, you used the opportunity of attacking the sects to humiliate the King of the Northern Frontier. Now you want to humiliate the King of the Northern Frontier by attacking the aristocratic families. We can't figure it out. If the King of the Northern Frontier collapses, it doesn't seem to be beneficial to Lord Dragon King, right? Zhang Xiu repeatedly pondered over Lin Yuan's actions and results. The King of the Northern Frontier was a fig leaf for the Xinwu dynasty, but wasn't it also a fig leaf for Lin Yuan? If it weren't for the existence of the King of the Northern Frontier in name, the 7 dynasties would not have allowed the monster forces to step out of the Hengduan Mountains, let alone control the lives and deaths of tens of thousands of people in a region. Therefore, the existence of the King of the Northern Frontier was not only a foreshadowing left behind by the Xinwu dynasty to invade the Northern Frontier in the future, it was also a banner that Lin Yuan had to raise. What's more, even if the 7 dynasties did not care about Lin Yuan, without the principle of the supremacy of the royal authority, there were still not many benefits for Lin Yuan to govern the Northern Frontier. After all, when the hearts of the people lost their fear of the royal authority, even if the King of the Northern Frontier was completely turned into a puppet, how could Lin Yuan, the Dragon King of the Blackwater, not be affected by it? The Northern Frontier does not need a king. What the Northern Frontier needs is a book of laws and a leader. To the Northern Frontier, the identity of the leader is not important. As long as the direction he chooses is right, he will naturally be supported. As for the impact on the royal authority, Lin Yuan smiled. His voice paused for a moment, and then he revealed his sharpness and coldly said, "What does it have to do with this king? This king is not the ruler of the northern frontier. In name, this king is the righteous God in charge of the northern frontier. Without the king of the northern frontier is still the northern frontier. But without this king, this righteous God, is the northern frontier still the northern frontier?" Zhang Xiu thought silently for a moment. Suddenly he grinned and cupped his hands, saying, "I see. I have learned something." However, Zhang Xiu had clearly not come all this way to clean up the pawns of the Ether Association. Nor was it to stand up for Hu Yan, who was doomed to die. As a result, Zhang Xiu quickly adjusted his state of mind and said, "Sir Dragon King, you should know that although the current Shenwu Empire is still in a precarious state, it's still far from before, when the empire could have been destroyed with the slightest carelessness. We only need a bit of time to return to our golden age." "Yes." Lin Yuan nodded slightly and did not deny Zhang Xiu's words. "Then Lord Dragon King, you should know that you and the King of Qingpeng are our biggest opponents in wiping out the Pebble Stones. However, compared to the King of Qingpeng who directly rebelled, the northern frontier has accepted the imperial edict in name, and is under the jurisdiction of the Shenwu dynasty. It is up to you whether you accept it or not. It all depends on His Majesty's intentions and whether you are willing to submit to him." Zhang Xiu tilted his head and smiled evilly. He continued, "His Majesty's decree is that as long as the northern frontier is willing to send troops to suppress the rebels, and is willing to solve some problems for His Majesty, then the northern frontier can still maintain the current situation, and can even receive our help. Please speak." Lin Yuan also tilted his head and replied indifferently. Lin Yuan did not expect the Shenwu dynasty to come and make requests at this time. However, Lin Yuan quickly figured out the crux of the matter. Although the Shenwu dynasty was unstoppable now, after careful study, one would realize that all the triumphs during this period were because of Shen Linjun's invincibility. However, even if Shen Linjun was really invincible, there was a limit to his scale. It was impossible for him to really plow through the entire Shenwu dynasty's territory. Otherwise, even an elite like Shen Linjun would suffer heavy losses. Therefore, if the Shenwu dynasty wanted to quell the internal strife as soon as possible, they needed the cooperation of Lin Yuan and Lei Qiuming. Therefore, Lin Yuan could be sure that when Zhang Xiu appeared at the northern frontier, the other person, who was no less important than Zhang Xiu, should have also rushed to Lei Qiuming's side. Lei Qiuxing's move was to make use of his two biggest rivals. After swallowing up the small rebels nearby, Lei Qiuxing's next step was to deal with the two of them wholeheartedly. First, since the northern frontier is the royal territory of the Shenwu dynasty, we cannot interfere with the internal legal reform of the royal territory. We can even pretend that the Dragon King did not overstep his authority and built a city without the permission of the dynasty. However, even if it is an autonomous royal territory, the taxes that should be paid should not be less, right? Zhang Xiu's eyes were smiling. Although his voice was soft, it suppressed Lin Yuan's aura. Chapter 420. Reasonable. Lin Yuan nodded and didn't raise any objections. As a subject, it was reasonable for him to pay taxes to the lords. If Lin Yuan couldn't do this, how could he ask those aristocratic families and city lords to pay taxes to him? After all, the Shenwu dynasty wasn't in existence that the northern frontier could casually abandon. Otherwise, the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce under his command would instantly become a joke, and the 7 dynasties would join forces to suppress him. Although the Shenwu dynasty's rule was 70% tax, the northern frontier was an autonomous territory, and also had the privilege of reducing taxes. 70% tax was considered a token, and wouldn't affect the northern frontier's development. It was within Lin Yuan's acceptable range. Second, the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce is using the Shenwu dynasty's name to do business with the 6 dynasties, but the benefits will all fall into Lord Dragon King's pocket. Don't you think this is inappropriate? Zhang Xiu's smile didn't fade. It was obvious that Lin Yuan's action of agreeing to pay taxes had given him confidence, so he struck while the iron was hot and raised the second condition. It's appropriate. The one who replied to Zhang Xiu this time was Lin Yuan's confident reply. Then, without waiting for Zhang Xiu to come up with words to persuade Lin Yuan said, "The Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce is now able to pass through the Hengduan mountain range and do business with the other 6 dynasties because it is 100% under my control. Therefore, I don't care if this is your idea, Lei Qiuxing's idea, or that influential person's idea. I won't make any concessions." At this point, Lin Yuan even yawned and said lazily, "Of course, you might have a way to seize the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce's ownership by force, or even make me suffer in silence. In that case, I can guarantee that no caravan will be able to pass through the Hengduan mountain range. Even the Shenwu dynasty's various prices, especially the prices of feis, will rapidly increase to a price that you won't be able to accept." "You?" Zhang Xiu's smile dimmed, and he almost couldn't suppress the anger in his heart. Lin Yuan's words were too arrogant. The moment he spoke, he directly called out Zhang Xiu, Lei Qiuxing, and some influential people. It was obvious that he didn't intend to give anyone face. He even threatened Zhang Xiu that if they dared to make a move on the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, the situation of him raising the prices of feis would happen again. Although the embroidered guard spies in the northern frontier had almost been completely uprooted, everyone knew that the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce's control absolutely belonged to Lin Yuan. Even if one had climbed to the position of vice president in the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, if Lin Yuan didn't say anything, they wouldn't be able to take out any feis from the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce's storehouse. This was because the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce's storehouse was in the Stoneclaw Forest, which belonged to the Fey Beast's territory. Without Lin Yuan's order, any human who stepped into the Stoneclaw Forest would definitely not have a good ending. As for Zhang Xiu's previous idea, he had wanted the Ether Association to cooperate with another Fey faction and replace Lin Yuan's exclusive control of feis. However, it seemed like this plan had come to an end. Why would a caravan under the banner of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce be able to cross the Hengduan mountain range? Because of benefits? Of course not. That was because Lin Yuan had the final say in the northern frontier. He also had the support of the 3 Beast Kings and Beast Lord Kirin. Lin Yuan, who had contributed greatly to the Fey Beast race's expansion, naturally had the face to do this. Even if the other Beast Kings didn't like humans, they had to suppress their temper and watch the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce's caravan pass through their territory on account of Lin Yuan's expansion. However, if it were another Fey Beast clan, they obviously wouldn't give Lin Yuan face, not to mention that Lin Yuan was very likely to be the next Beast Lord. This was especially so for the Green Swamp clan, which was the worst choice. The Green Swamp clan was indeed one of the stronger clans in the Hengduan mountain range. Even the Great Beast Kings had suffered losses before. However, there were many other powerful clans, and not all of them were as good as the 9-colored deer clan. An existence like the Green Swamp clan was no different from a rat crossing the street. If they were allowed to do this, no matter how many goods were transported, they would never be able to return. It was precisely because of these factors that those Beast Kings had opened the door to Lin Yuan for the sake of benefits. However, I am not an inflexible person. The Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce can bring in huge profits, and it's naturally impossible for no one to be jealous of this profit. Therefore, if a powerful ally is willing to join us, I naturally can't ask for anything more. I can make the decision to give you 30% of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce's annual income. As for whether this profit will be given to you, or if you will give it to Lei Qiuxing, or if it will be evenly distributed, that is your own business. I only need you to help me withstand the internal pressure of the Shenwu dynasty after receiving the benefits. Don't let anyone casually reach out to the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. As a compromise, I can agree to let the embroidered guard spies re-enter the northern frontier. However, I must have a list of these spies, and they must unconditionally accept the Council of the Fey Emperor's surveillance. If they do anything that crosses the line, or if there are spies not on the list, I will immediately eliminate them. Lin Yuan's heterochromatic eyes flashed with a dangerous cold light. He sneered and said, "If you don't agree, then you will have nothing. When the world falls into chaos again, I won't be as easy to talk to as I am now. Zhang Xiu thought for a moment before nodding heavily. Not to mention the Shenwu dynasty, even in the 7 grand dynasties, the status of merchants was actually not high. There was no such thing as business tax. Lin Yuan was willing to give them 30% of the profits, which was equivalent to giving the Shenwu dynasty a tax that was even higher than the annual income of the northern frontier. Moreover, it was the kind that would be directly sent to the private treasury. After receiving such great benefits, it was reasonable for them to help Lin Yuan resist the pressure from the nobles. That's all for this. There is one last thing. Zhang Xiu sighed helplessly and said in a deep voice, His Majesty often says that if you are a Fey Emperor, you will definitely be a good minister who can rule the world for him. Right now, His Majesty is very interested in your reforms, and is willing to use the northern frontier as a test area. At the same time, he will also open up some new test areas within the Shenwu dynasty. However, your attitude towards the sects and aristocratic families is already very clear. However, for His Majesty, there is still a huge problem that has not been resolved. The various vassals? Lin Yuan smiled and took the initiative to ask. That's right. Zhang Xiu nodded and said coldly, There cannot be a second example like Lei Qiuming. Actually, learning from Lin Yuan to deal with the northern frontier king was also a method. However, Lei Qiuxing would definitely not be willing to do something that would shake the royal authority and the foundation of the Grand Dynasty. Chapter 421. Your Highness, it's not good. Outside. There are a lot of rioters outside, and they are attacking the main gate of the Hu estate. A guard of the prince's mansion, whose armor was stained with blood, rotten vegetables and eggs, quickly walked over and reported to Hu Yan, who was standing on the main seat. Hu Yan, who was confronting Qiao Yilin, was slightly startled, and the anger in his eyes almost solidified. The northern frontier was now peaceful and prosperous. Those refugees who didn't know the top of the food chain in the northern frontier even praised him. The king of the northern frontier, as an extraordinary prince, a hero who could open up a paradise in troubled times. Therefore, these people definitely wouldn't attack his private residence for no reason. Moreover, for such a big matter, even if his subordinates wanted to report, they wouldn't say it out loud in front of so many outsiders. In order to avoid unnecessary panic, they would at most come over and whisper a few words to give him enough time to react, and arrange for these family heads to leave the Hu estate's main courtyard first. Therefore, at this point, it was already very obvious. Qiao Yilin's sudden attack, the rioters attacking the main gate of the Hu estate, and the guards reporting it out loud regardless of the consequences. All of these, from the beginning to the end, were conspiracies planned by the association of the Demon Emperor. The guard in front of him, whom he trusted the most, was also a member of the association of the Demon Emperor. Tonight was Hu Yan's private banquet. In order to prevent the association of the Demon Emperor's spies from sneaking in, he even cleared out the Hu estate's servants and branch family members in advance, including the servants, the cooks and the guards. They were all his trusted aides, and anyone who he suspected was not qualified to enter the Hu estate's main courtyard tonight. But even so, who knew how many of the association of the Demon Emperor's spies were in this group of people? Sure enough, almost as soon as the messenger's voice fell, all the patriarchs in the Hu clan's courtyard shot up from their seats, as if there were steel needles in their chairs. Pairs of ice-cold gazes fell on Hu Yan's face, as if they wanted nothing more than to swallow Hu Yan alive. To these family heads, they were all in the same boat. Apart from being the family head of the Hu estate, Hu Yan also had the identity of the king of the northern frontier. At such a crucial moment, Hu Yan gathered them here to put on a show and give Lin Yuan an excuse to wipe them out in one fell swoop. Feeling the cold eyes on him, Hu Yan opened his mouth several times, but couldn't say a word. He couldn't explain anything now. Even if Lin Yuan didn't take this opportunity to wipe out the northern frontier families, he would still skin them ruthlessly. As the person who set up this trap, Hu Yan was very clear that even if Lin Yuan didn't take care of him, these family heads who suffered losses wouldn't let him have an easy time. and the entire Hu estates would have no place in the northern frontier's northern frontier. Everyone's performance today has been broadcasted by the Association of the Demon Emperor, through the projection stone in every city in the northern frontier. Family head Hu, now do you know why the people of Shunning City attacked your Hu estate? Xiao Yilin patted the non-existent dust on his gown, looked around at everyone with a cold face, and said in a cold voice, ever since Lord Dragon King took over the northern frontier, he pushed for new policies, established new laws and built new cities. Every move he made was for the betterment of the northern frontier. You are all northern frontier families, and you are all existences who share the same fate with this land. I originally thought that you would help Lord Dragon King, but I didn't expect that all of you would only be eyeing the small profits on your plate. Everything was as Li Zhong had predicted. Ever since Lin Yuan took over the northern frontier and established the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, all the sects and families made a lot of money in the beginning. Even the commoners who worked in related industries made a lot of money. After Lin Yuan defeated the sects, the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce's profits were split between Lin Yuan and the aristocratic families. In the process of suppressing the sects in the northern frontier, the aristocratic families didn't do anything at all. Only the Qiao family showed their faces, but the aristocratic families didn't let go of any of the profits that the sects gave up after they withdrew. They thought that the aristocratic families were already satisfied. At least with the example of the sects, even if they were dissatisfied with the land clearance, they would only complain in private, but on the surface, they would definitely cooperate. But no one expected that the aristocratic families would resist so strongly when Lin Yuan wanted to take away the land that they didn't value very much. It was obvious that they only wanted to take in and not take out. They only wanted to reap benefits from Lin Yuan, and completely didn't think that they would have to contribute something to the reform of the northern frontier. Li Zhong had only thought of this after being obstructed again and again. Previously, the benefits of the northern frontier basically fell into the pockets of the aristocratic families. This time, although the land would eventually belong to the northern frontier prince's mansion, the commoners would actually benefit from it. Now that the aristocratic families didn't want to give up their land, Li Zhong simply used Hu Yan's last stand to let the commoners know who was obstructing the implementation of the new policy, and who didn't want them to get the benefits that they deserved. At this point, the public was completely infuriated. When the commoners of Shunning City attacked the Hu Mansion, Li Zhong knew that the Hu Mansion was just a small microcosm. Soon, all the aristocratic families in the northern frontier would face the same scene. Their greed would bring them the cruelest consequences. At the same time, the entire northern battlefront army canceled their vacation. They were transferred to the northern frontier from all the posts, strongholds, and outskirts barracks. A large number of demi-human warriors from the monster forest were also transferred to the northern frontier. Under Li Zhong's operation, the aristocratic families in the northern frontier would be destroyed. At the same time, the northern frontier would also become chaotic. The arrival of the army could maximize the control of the situation. First, neither Lin Yuan nor Li Zhong wanted to take advantage of the situation to wipe out the aristocratic families in the northern frontier. Second, once the northern frontier became chaotic, people with ulterior motives or those lazy thugs would follow the trend to rob, fight, and smash things, which would make the northern frontier even more chaotic. Therefore, Li Zhong was very clear that the situation couldn't be out of control. Even if he had to use force, he had to repair the cracks in the chaos as soon as possible, so that everything would be under his control. The young man surnamed Wang's face obviously looked better. Although the commoners in the northern frontier might not let the Wang family go, he dared to go against Hu Yan and expressed that he didn't want to be Lin Yuan's enemy, so it wasn't completely useless. Even if it was just a show, Lin Yuan would protect him, the sensible head of the family, and the family. Chapter 422. When Zhang Xiu returned to the imperial capital, it was already 5 days later. It wasn't that Zhang Xiu was slow, but that he had stayed in the northern frontier for the past few days, and had been discussing some details with Lin Yuan. Zhang Xiu had only left when he had more or less understood Lin Yuan's plan, and the future reform of the northern frontier. On the way, he had already begun to record what he had seen and heard in the northern frontier. He then organized it into written documents and prepared to submit it to the Emperor Xinwu when he met him. After greeting the two guards, Shenlinjun, Zhang Xiu tidied his robe and walked into the imperial study. He raised his eyes slightly and saw Lei Qiuxing sitting on a large chair with a worried face. His right hand was holding the back of the chair and lightly tapping it. He was frowning and thinking about something. Zhang Xiu cleared his throat and bowed to Lei Qiuxing. He said in a clear voice, "I, Zhang Xiu, greet the Divine Martial Emperor. Thanks to your Majesty's blessing, I was able to successfully establish contact with the Black Jiao. These are the details. Your Majesty, please take a look." After he finished speaking, Lei Qiuxing seemed to have realized that Zhang Xiu had walked into the imperial study. He cleared his throat and the worry on his face instantly disappeared. Immediately, one of the eunuchs serving Lei Qiuxing bowed and trotted to Zhang Xiu's side. He held the documents that Zhang Xiu had written with both hands and trotted back to Lei Qiuxing's side. "My dear minister, you may rise." Lei Qiuxing took the documents from the eunuchs and lowered his head to read them. He didn't even raise his head as he spoke. Only then did Zhang Xiu stop kneeling. However, he still maintained a proper posture and stood there, carefully observing Lei Qiuxing's expression. After about 4 or 5 breaths, a smile appeared on Lei Qiuxing's originally serious face. He said in a low voice, using the greed of the aristocratic families to incite public anger, deliberately allowing the people under his rule to suppress the aristocratic families, and also increasing the strength of the troops stationed in various places. This Black Jiao is very powerful. He has the entire northern frontier aristocratic families in a tight grip. Even if they can survive the anger of the people, if they want to earn a living in the northern frontier in the future, they will have to rely on the Black Jiao. Ever since Lin Yuan had taken control of the northern frontier, Lei Qiuxing had been observing Lin Yuan's actions. On this matter, Lei Qiuxing didn't blindly trust Zhang Xiu and the embroidered uniform guard like before. Instead, he sent out imperial spies who had been heavily nurtured but might not be used in their entire lives to gather information about the northern frontier. Ever since Lin Yuan had chased away the Green Marsh clan and completely confirmed his position as the overlord of the Stoneclaw Forest and the surrounding areas, Lei Qiuxing had sighed from time to time. He expressed that if this Black Jiao, who had broken the norm, was a human, he would be the best candidate for the position of Grand Secretary of the Xinwu dynasty. "Your Majesty, the information about the northern frontier is just a matter of convenience. You asked me to ask about the Black Jiao, and he also answered." Zhang Xiu stood with his head held high and chest out. However, a hint of seriousness flashed across his eyes. He said in a deep voice, "In my humble opinion, although this Black Jiao has given a solution, it is a strong medicine. Your Majesty needs to plan slowly. At the very least, you have to wait until the rebels under the Qingping King's command have been dealt with before you can implement it." Order of gratitude? Before Zhang Xiu could finish speaking, Lei Qiuxing interrupted him. Zhang Xiu knew that Lei Qiuxing was expressing his dissatisfaction with him for interrupting him. He simply shut his mouth obediently and waited for the result. He had inquired about every detail of Lin Yuan's order of gratitude. On the way back, he had thought about it repeatedly. He was certain that although this move was beneficial for the Xinwu dynasty to weaken the vassal kings, once this decree was issued, the vassal kings of the Xinwu dynasty would be in uproar. Even the imperial clan court would express that this move was against the ancestral system. Although Lei Qiuxing was the founding emperor of the Xinwu dynasty, the monarchs of the 7 dynasties could not avoid the harem. Firstly, they needed a large number of heirs to choose the most suitable candidate to inherit the throne. Secondly, in such a large dynasty, aristocratic families, sects, and even nobles were forces that could not be ignored. As an emperor, he had to establish marriage relationships with various forces. Otherwise, if the people's hearts were not stable, the emperor's rule would not be stable. Therefore, whether it was Lei Qiuxing who sat in the Xinwu dynasty, or the vassal kings who were in theft, they all had many concubines. These women did not have any other abilities, but they were definitely not that great. Otherwise, they would not have been sent to the harem by their families to fight for favor. However, they were indeed good at seducing men. Even a diligent monarch like Lei Qiusheng had 17 princes and 8 princesses. Even if Lei Qiusheng did not have any more heirs, after these princes came of age and selected suitable heirs, the remaining sons would also be sent to various places to be vassal kings. Once these vassal kings operated in their own territories for too long, it was easy for them to become recognized as kings by the commoners. Not to mention the fact that there was an emperor above them. Just like Lei Qiuming's rebellion this time, there was not a single person in the entire Qingpeng who said no. Although Lei Qiusheng's rebellion was successful and the royal family of the Wanjian dynasty was swept clean, those old bastards who had followed him to conquer the world were still enfeoffed as vassal kings in various places. Even if their contributions were not enough to be conferred as kings, they were now high-ranking officials. After a few decades of effort, as long as they were not exiled like Yan Xingqi, even if they were a pig, they would be able to operate a considerable force in their own territory. Lei Qiuming's order to gather hundreds of thousands of rebels was indeed shocking. However, which of the military officers and nobles who had followed him to occupy the Magpie's Nest had less prestige than Lei Qiuming? They just did not take advantage of this opportunity to rebel. If they had any ideas, their influence might not be any less than Lei Qiuming's. Lei Qiusheng wanted to prevent Lei Qiuming's rebellion from happening again. Removing the vassal kings was the most important thing at the moment. However, whether it was now or in the future, there was no difference. If he wanted to remove the vassal kings, it would definitely cause the vassal kings to retaliate fiercely. Perhaps the situation that had been stabilized with great difficulty would once again fall short of success. However, using the Edict of Pushing Grace to remove the vassal kings was the safest method. The vassal kings in that place did not have 7 or 8 children. When the old vassal king passed away, according to the tacit rule of the 7 great empires, the eldest son would inherit the old vassal king's title and territory, and become the new vassal king. Day after day he would continue to operate in his fief. As for the territories that belonged to the emperor, they would be enfeoffed to the new vassal king when the new emperor succeeded the throne. After all, they were all the emperor's sons. However, in this way, the imperial power would be lower and lower. Even when there were many vassal kings in the country, the emperor in name would only be considered a slightly stronger vassal king. Chapter 423. Not to mention a tyrannical emperor like Lei Qiusheng. Even if he was the lord of the earth, he would not want his territory to become weaker and his faction to become stronger and stronger. Therefore, the imperial power would constantly collide with each other. If those vassals were as troublesome as hedgehogs, then the change of imperial power would evolve into a struggle for the throne. The emperor's sons would frequently scheme in the imperial capital, and for the sake of the throne, they would not hesitate to kill each other until the strongest prince was chosen. Lin Yuan's command of Pushing Grace was different. This was a strong medicine, but it forced the vassals to be like the emperor. After their death, they would equally distribute their territory to each of their children. Although the title did not change, the actual power gap was too big. A prince would become a duke, and a duke would become a marquis. After 2 or 3 generations, most of the descendants of these vassals would also be guarding a city. It would be a fool's dream if they wanted to challenge the imperial power. At that time, the emperor would find a reason to take back the territory. The command of Pushing Grace was also a poisonous scheme. Just like how the ministers in the imperial court favored different princes according to their relationship and faction, the subordinates of the vassals naturally favored different princes. Once the command of Pushing Grace was taken out, whether the vassals were willing or not was another matter. However, except for the eldest son, each of the princes would spend a lot of effort to ensure the implementation of the command of Pushing Grace. After all, to be able to get a part of their father's territory was better than having nothing. It was better to be a rich man in the royal territory, afraid that his brother would find an excuse to kill him. By the time they regretted, it would already be time for them to split the vassal territory and pass it down to the next generation. What was the use of regretting at that time? Oh, After reading Lin Yuan's command of pushing grace, Lei Qiuxing let out a long breath and sneered. Amazing, amazing. If these sons of mine had half the ability of this Black Jiao, I would not need to continue to be in charge of the imperial court in the name of Heaven Dipper realm. I would have already found a place with rich spiritual energy to cultivate. Zhang Xiu bowed slightly but did not speak. As the newly appointed head of Lei Qiuxing's secret service, Zhang Xiu could do many things without any taboos. If an official below rank 3 offended Zhang Xiu in any way, Zhang Xiu would not even need to find an excuse to kill them. However, when it came to matters related to the succession of the throne, Zhang Xiu could not be involved at all. Your Majesty, although the writ of gratitude is feasible, now is not the time for us to imitate the Black Jiao's new policies. Zhang Xiu lowered his voice and said with a serious expression, although Shen Linjun is strong, it is impossible for him to sweep through the entire territory with the strength of an army. When the rebels react, the situation that was stabilized with great difficulty will change again. Now that the Black Jiao is willing to cooperate with us, if we can persuade the king of Qingpeng to send out the 3 armies together, we will be able to pacify the world. At that time, it will be time for us to use the token of pushing grace. Lei Qiuxing closed his eyes slightly and leaned on the big chair. The great divine martial emperor was actually forced to worry about personal gains and losses by a group of rebels that could be easily annihilated. Even the imperial guards that guarded the imperial capital were not able to make all the rebels disappear in one battle. However, the Qingjiang and Shuangjian empires were still biting like vicious dogs. Almost all of the imperial forces were gathered at the border battlefield, and there were not many troops to pacify the rebellion. It was already the limit of the imperial forces to maintain the current situation. Now the only thing that Lei Qiuxing could hope for was that the 2 largest groups of rebels would accept the amnesty. Only when the king of Qingpeng and the northern frontier sent out troops to suppress the rebels could the Xinwu dynasty be truly stabilized. Let them go. Lei Qiuxing slowly opened his eyes, and a sharp light flashed through his pupils. He said in a deep voice, "Don't worry about the northern frontier. The generals Li Zhongxing and Zhang Qilin were both from Shenlinjun. Even if these people die, they will not turn against me. As long as the Black Jiao does not change its generals, it means that it has no intention of rebelling for the time being. Instead, we need to pay more attention to the king of Qingpeng." "I understand." Zhang Xiu bowed slightly and replied in a deep voice. On the other side, in the northern frontier, Li Zhongxing was wearing a black armor. Looking at the red flag in front of him with the word Li printed in black characters, his eyes revealed a look of contemplation. 1,300,000 soldiers of the southern expedition gathered behind Li Zhongxing. Under the leadership of the various generals, they formed a square formation. They did not look like ruffians at all. Instead, they revealed the aura of a mighty army. An hour later, the southern expedition would officially step out of the northern frontier. They would sweep away the rebels nearby and expand the battle line until it covered the entire north. They would be separated from the imperial capital of the Xinwu dynasty by the Wei River. "Commander, what are you thinking about?" A guard went up and covered Li Zhongxing with a cloak and asked in a low voice. Li Zhongxing's right hand pressed on the hilt of the sword at his waist. He said bitterly, "Emperor's grace, people, the Dragon King has given me a difficult problem." From the education that Li Zhongxing had received since he was young, the actions of the aristocratic families were not wrong. After all, Shenlin Jun either chose soldiers from the orphans of the soldiers who died in battle, or chose young people with good family backgrounds near the imperial capital. These people had received education since they were young that the imperial capital was supreme. Apart from that, the aristocratic families were respected. However, during this period of time in the northern frontier, Li Zhongxing had already seen the power of the people under the guidance of Lin Yuan. Li Zhongxing originally wanted to protect the rule of the Xinwu dynasty, reduce the welfare of the people, and enslave the people was a natural idea. He had been attacked more than once in the northern frontier. Even now, Li Zhongxing did not know whether his original insistence was right or wrong. Otherwise, when he received Lin Yuan's transfer order, Li Zhongxing would have gone back to the northern frontier prince's mansion, and told Li Zhong everything. That way, even Li Zhong would not have provoked the anger of the people on the northern frontier to target the aristocratic families. However, in the end, Li Zhongxing did not go. He more or less wanted to escape. The guard pondered for a moment and said in a low voice, "General, things have come to this point. It's meaningless to say these things. This time, we are sending troops to suppress the rebels in the north under the orders of the Shenwu dynasty and the Dragon King. I don't understand the worries in your heart, but you can think about it later. For now, it's more important to complete the task at hand." Li Zhong turned his head and glanced at his personal guard. He smiled bitterly again and shook his head. The purpose of the Southern Expedition Army was indeed to clean up the rebellious officials, but doing it according to Lin Yuan's idea and doing it according to the Shenwu dynasty's idea belonged to two completely different paths. And now he was confused because he didn't know which path he was going to take. "Let's go." Li Zhongxing shook the cloak on his body and turned around to roar. The 3 million soldiers of the Southern Expedition immediately roared in agreement. Chapter 424. The resistance of the northern frontier aristocratic families vanished in the face of the anger of the northern frontier citizens. The reason why these aristocratic families could still exist in the northern frontier was because of the protection of the northern frontier prince's residence. How could they still have the guts to challenge the northern frontier? Li Zhong, who had eliminated his biggest political enemy, obtained the highest command authority in the northern frontier prince's residence, while the northern frontier prince's residence Huyan was imprisoned. At the same time, with the cooperation of the various departments, he began to show his prowess. The first thing was to calculate all the cultivated land in each gathering place. Of course, it wasn't just about how much cultivated land there was. It also included the size of the cultivated land, the division of the cultivated land, and the output. It was also divided into 3 categories according to the fertility of the land. In this first document, the location of the cultivated land, whether it was planted with food or phase, and the estimated output was recorded in great detail. The second thing was to establish the position of grain chief, according to the distribution of cultivated land in each settlement. The position would be held by the farmer who rented the most cultivated land and had a good moral character. Although the position of grain chief was just an empty title without any real power or rank, he would be responsible for calculating the total harvest in his own area during the harvest. He would also be responsible for collecting the taxes that should be paid every year. After all this was done, he would also have to prepare a written document and submit it to the local government. Unless the tax was collected, the local government was not allowed to participate in the collection of taxes. Of course, it wasn't just that the local government was not allowed to participate in the collection of taxes. Li Zhong also established various government offices such as the Population Statistics Department and the Farmland Exploration Department. He also prepared the existence of security teams in each of the grain districts. The specific authority was divided in detail and adopted a system of joint punishment. If there was a problem in any aspect, which led to a discrepancy in the amount of taxes paid, everyone would be punished. Although these new government offices established by Li Zhong were scattered in various places, none of them were under the jurisdiction of the local government. Their food and clothing were all provided by the northern frontier prince's residence. Moreover, they were all empty titles. When they met the local government officials, they still had to bow and salute. However, they also had the ability to directly report to the northern frontier prince's residence. It could be said that both sides were restricting each other. In addition, except for the grain chief, the other empty titles were all not ordinary people. The person in charge of each department would be transferred every 3 years. After 3 years, they would be transferred to another place to take up the same official position. After 9 years, if they were capable and had outstanding political achievements, they would be given priority and promotion to the various government offices under the northern frontier prince's residence. In these 9 years, if their political achievements were mediocre, they would undergo another 9 years of assessment. If their political achievements were bad, they would be immediately removed from their official position and would be investigated. The staff members below the division chief were all graduates of the Northern Frontier Academy. They were also changed every 3 years. During their employment, they could submit their resumes to the various government offices under the Northern Frontier Prince's residence to be recruited. However, they would not be given priority in recruitment. In addition to this internal system, there was also the supervision of the Demon Emperor Association under Lin Yuan's command, who appeared and disappeared mysteriously. The various government offices with empty titles, local government offices, the Demon Emperor Association, the Grain Chief, and other parties would make the same matter several times more detailed. It was not troublesome for everyone to carry out their tasks. They could also supervise each other to ensure that there would not be any conflicts. In addition, the officials with empty titles would be transferred to other places to carry out their tasks just like the official officials. There was no such thing as a flowing city lord being an ironclad official. The third matter was back to the land clearing project. Due to man-made factors, natural disasters and other factors, the yield of the cultivated land would decrease or increase. Moreover, the land needed to be cultivated year after year. Otherwise, the land would lose its fertility and would no longer be able to grow good crops. Therefore, clearing the land was not a one-time project. After every harvest, the land would be cleared again. At the same time, a census of the population would be conducted in each settlement to ensure that there would not be any fraud. This series of reforms simply made some people with ulterior motives dumbfounded. After all, Lin Yuan was now working for the welfare of the people in the northern frontier. Establishing a complex and fair system would not cause any dissatisfaction. However, to them, it was extremely bad news. Whether they wanted to reap benefits or sabotage, Lin Yuan's move meant that they would not have that opportunity. Late at night, in the northern frontier prince's mansion, Li Zhong finished sorting out the documents in his hands and sealed the files. Only then did he yawn and get up from his office desk. He stretched his body and looked at the groups of patrolling guards outside. His pair of slender sword-like eyebrows were slightly furrowed. The land clearing project was completed, but the biggest problem was still unsolved. For example, the taxes for the officials and the people, and how should the land distributed to the farmers be divided? As the old saying goes, one does not worry about scarcity, but about uneven distribution. Some people took more land, while others took less. When the time came, there would definitely be disputes. At the same time, this was also the last chance for the aristocratic families to struggle. Furthermore, being an official in the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion meant that they no longer had the benefits of tax reduction. Even if they could become the prince of the Northern Frontier, they would still have to pay 50% of the taxes on their own land. Although their salaries had increased a lot compared to the time when the Shimwu dynasty ruled the Northern Frontier, they still felt that something was missing without the income from the land under their names. It was easy for the civil and military officials in the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion to lose their motivation and only know how to live in their own positions. Even if he set up a strict official evaluation system, it was useless. For these people, it was better to save up some capital to do business with the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce than serve the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion. Although the salary given by the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion was not small, it paled in comparison to the benefits of a business transaction with the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. Although Li Zhong seemed to have a lot of authority in the land clearing project, the 10 years of tax reduction, the taxes for the officials and the people, as well as the establishment of various government offices were all things that Lin Yuan had prepared long ago. He only needed to take them out at the right time. When it came to other issues, even if Li Zhong had 10,000 ideas, he would not dare to make a decision on his own. "Mr. Li, are you planning to go back and rest?" A patrolling guard greeted Li Zhong with a smile. This guard was the one who had announced in Hu Yan's mansion that the people were storming the gate. He was originally a secret agent of the Association of the Demon Emperor. Although he was barely receiving a salary from the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion, serving Hu Yan and serving Lin Yuan were two different things. With the merit of bringing Hu Yan down, this guard had become a captain of the permanent guards of the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion. He was in charge of thousands of people. He was not a big figure in the whole northern frontier, but in Shunning City, where there were only 100,000 princes' mansion guards, he was a qianhu. Chapter 425. No, it's just an if. I want to see his lordship Dragon King. Li Zhong smiled politely at the other party. Whether a person was smart or not, it did not depend on whether he could speak eloquently or come up with clever plans, but whether he could recognize his own position. Although Li Zhong was now in charge of the land clearance and other matters, during the period when Hu Yan was under house arrest, the various departments of the Northern Frontier Palace had to deploy all their manpower to assist him. Currently, he could be considered as the highest-ranking official in the Northern Frontier Palace. However, this was only temporary. Once the land clearance was completed, and the subsequent developments were on the right track, Li Zhong, this Mr. without any official position, would no longer be considered a big shot in the Northern Frontier Palace. Even if the Lord Dragon King would reward him handsomely, in terms of name, this Lord Qianhu before him would be able to crush him to death. Hu Yan had been as careful and cautious as Li Zhong back then. Otherwise, after Lei Fan had been forced to leave, the position of king of the northern frontier would not have fallen onto Hu Yan's head. And during that period of time, because of the Green Swamp Tribe and the Ether Society, Lin Yuan had neglected the situation in the Northern Frontier Palace. Therefore, although Hu Yan did not have Lei Fan's ability and influence, but during that period of time, his authority was much greater than Lei Fan's. Hu Yan had fallen into the trap for two reasons. Firstly, Lin Yuan had already planned this. After all, he wanted to support the new laws of the Northern Frontier, and not the king of the Northern Frontier. As a member of an aristocratic family, it was only a matter of time before Hu Yan would clash with Lin Yuan over the land clearance issue. Secondly, it was because Hu Yan had become too arrogant. Otherwise, he would not have come up with the idea of going against Li Zhong to stop the land clearance project. Of course, it was still the same old saying that Hu Yan had fallen to such a state today. It was not because Lin Yuan had forced him to do it. Hu Yan and Lei Fan had died in the same way. They had both grasped authority, but did not have enough authority. Arrogance and greed had caused him to have a rebellious heart. And that was why he had fallen to such a state. Learn from the mistakes of others and learn from the mistakes of others. Hu Yan had not learned his lesson from Lei Fan, but Li Zhong had learned his lesson from Lei Fan and Hu Yan. Naturally, he would not be arrogant. Lord Dragon King? Lord Dragon King is currently in the front yard of the residence. If you go now, you should still be able to make it. Qianhu smiled kindly at Li Zhong. During this period of time, Lin Yuan would make a trip to the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion every day to check on the progress of the land clearing project. At the same time, he would also check on how much surplus grain was left in the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion, and whether it was enough to supply other projects in the Northern Frontier, and the implementation of the new policies. At the same time, he would also listen to the opinions of the officials working in the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion. Li Zhong nodded and thanked Qianhu before walking towards the front yard. For the other officials to want to enter and leave the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion freely, it was not a realistic thing. Each department had their own office space, and even Hu Yan could not casually interfere with the operations of each department. But Li Zhong was different. As the most popular person in the Northern Frontier, even if Li Zhong had no official position at the moment, everyone knew that it would not be long before Li Zhong would become a big figure, who could shake the entire Northern Frontier with just a stomp of his feet. It was not to the extent that everyone would come up to fawn on him, but there were still quite a number of people who came up to Li Zhong to get acquainted with him. When Li Zhong came to the front yard of the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion, Lin Yuan, who was sitting cross-legged, was looking at him with a pair of different colored eyes. His gaze filled with a hint of ridicule, a hint of playfulness, and a hint of contemplation. Lord Dragon King, your student pays his respects to you. Li Zhong clasped his fist and bowed to Lin Yuan in greeting. Lin Yuan nodded slightly in return, his gaze still shining as he looked at Li Zhong. He had no intention of taking the initiative to speak, but his gaze was clearly telling Li Zhong, I already know what you're thinking. Li Zhong did not put on an act. He simply walked in front of Lin Yuan and voiced his concerns one by one. That's it. Lin Yuan tilted his head and calmly said, I thought that your brain was one of the smartest in the world. Is it that difficult to solve the problem of those officials' ambition? I gave you the authority to set up a government office without official posts, but you didn't get any inspiration? And before, the noble families were reduced from land taxes. As the person in charge of the land clearance project, don't you know to set up a business tax reduction for them? This your student doesn't dare. The corner of Li Zhong's mouth twitched slightly. He clasped his fist and said, You let your student set up a government office without official posts. Your student thought hard and felt that although these government offices increased expenses, they reduced the chances of officials being corrupt. At the same time, with an official evaluation system, they could also select more and better talents for our Northern Frontier Prince's residents. It's just like how some people are suitable for writing, but can't become an official. Some people are suitable for being an official, but have no education. These government offices without official posts are like a demon-revealing mirror. With one try, you can see if they're made for it. At this point, Li Zhong paused, adjusted his train of thought, and continued. Although your student has the intention to imitate, I can't think of a method similar to Dragon King's. Not only are the government offices useless, but they will also make the organization bloated. And we have to spend a lot of unnecessary expenses every year. Li Zhong first praised Lin Yuan's brilliance, then humbly asked Lin Yuan for his perseverance. However, he didn't mention his own ideas or the business tax reduction that Lin Yuan mentioned. It wasn't that Li Zhong didn't have any ideas, but when meeting with his superior, he had to be more thoughtful. After all, strictly speaking, these things were outside of Li Zhong's authority. If he made a detailed plan, it would be overstepping his authority. As for the business tax reduction, it was completely up to Lin Yuan. After all, if this matter wasn't handled well, it would create a large number of new noble families. Although the noble families of the northern frontier hadn't been destroyed, in the northern frontier, noble families had become a derogatory term. Lin Yuan definitely didn't want the current situation to change. What? Is the government office without official posts the kind that doesn't work and only takes money? Go back and draft a notice. Anyone who has been an official in the Northern Frontier Prince's residence for 60 years will have their descendants supported by the Northern Frontier Prince's residence. Lin Yuan looked at Li Zhong for a while, then suddenly laughed and softly muttered a few words. Ah! Li Zhong immediately frowned and whispered. Dragon King, Lord Dragon King, firstly, no one has done this before. Secondly, it's not very attractive. For the current Northern Frontier, it's better to do business than to be an official. 60 years in the Northern Frontier Prince's residence is really not as good as 60 years in business with the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. Not to mention supporting their descendants. It wouldn't be a problem to ensure 3 or 4 generations of prosperity. Then it's a problem with your choice of words. Lin Yuan said with an unfathomable expression. What if you say that the Northern Frontier Prince's residence will establish the embroidered uniform guard? And that anyone whose father has been an official in the Northern Frontier Prince's residence for 60 years will have a nominal position in the embroidered uniform guard, 2 ranks lower than their father, and 2/3 of the salary of an official of the same rank. Chapter 426. Isn't that the same? Li Zhong resisted the urge to roll his eyes. Once an official in the prince's mansion at the northern frontier had worked for 60 years, they would be considered to have reached the age of retirement, according to the new laws of the northern frontier. Regardless of their cultivation, they could no longer continue to work as an official in the prince's mansion at the northern frontier. However, they could receive a pension from the prince's mansion at the northern frontier every month. Even though it could not compare to their salary, it was still an income, right? There is no limit to the number of people in the embroidered uniform guard. They will temporarily be military positions, and each official can only have 1 son. Once there is a vacancy in the northern frontier's military system, and there is no one below them who can be directly promoted, the embroidered uniform guard members can lower their ranks and directly take over the vacant position. Similarly, after this person has worked for 60 years, their children can still work in the embroidered uniform guard. Lin Yuan's next words soon caused Li Zhong to sink into deep thought. The northern frontier might be pushing new policies, but the power of the military would always be indispensable. Being a baihu in the northern frontier's military system was much more important than being a high-ranking official in the prince's mansion at the northern frontier. Just the fact that they could directly lower their ranks and take over a military position without having to wait for an evaluation was enough to attract countless people to join the embroidered uniform guard. The embroidered uniform guard did not recruit outsiders. They only accepted the children of officials who had worked for 60 years in the prince's mansion at the northern frontier. Besides, the higher the rank of the father, the higher the rank of the son in the embroidered uniform guard. At that time, the lower the rank of the son in the embroidered uniform guard, the higher the rank of the son in the embroidered uniform guard. Not only did this solve the problem of the officials in the northern frontier being ambitious to secure their positions as military officials, these officials would also conduct strict training for their children, which could be considered as solving the problem of talent. Similarly, only the officials who had worked for the prince's mansion at the northern frontier until they retired could enjoy the benefits of having a son in the embroidered uniform guard. It also solved the problem of the officials in the northern frontier not doing any work and even thinking about quitting to do business. Killing 3 birds with 1 stone? It seemed that there was more to it. Also, the embroidered uniform guard can't be considered a government office in name only. I plan to split the embroidered uniform guard into 2 departments, one in the light and one in the dark. The light department will be independent of the local government and will be in charge of the safety of the gathering place. They will be in charge of arresting and interrogating. However, the criminals will still be sent to the prison set up by the local government. The dark department was responsible for investigation, supervision, and collecting intelligence from both sides during wartime. They were also responsible for monitoring the integrity of the local officials. They were also responsible for monitoring each other with the secret agents of the Association of the Demon Emperor. They were responsible for ensuring that what the northern frontier prince's residents heard and saw was not what some people wanted the northern frontier prince's residents to hear and see. The embroidered uniform guards only need to answer to me and the king of the northern frontier. As for the others, no matter what position or identity they have on the northern frontier, as long as they have evidence, they can send the embroidered uniform guards to arrest them. Lin Yuan let out a sigh of relief, but his eyes shone brightly. Ding Zai's manipulation of the Association of the Demon Emperor to block his vision had taught him a lesson. Although the secret agents of the Association of the Demon Emperor were everywhere in the northern frontier, once something happened within the Association of the Demon Emperor, Lin Yuan would become a blind existence. However, the northern frontier belonged to the Xinwu dynasty, and the nominal king was Hu Yan. Lin Yuan's territory system could not be used in the northern frontier. Otherwise, he would not have kept so many spies for his own use. As expected of Lord Dragon King. Amazing, amazing. After listening to Lin Yuan's series of ideas, Li Zhong clapped his hands and cheered. After all, once Lin Yuan set up the embroidered uniform guards, his biggest problem would be solved. He could not help but return to his office to record the details of Lin Yuan's idea of the embroidered uniform guards. He would go back and think about it repeatedly to see if he could come up with a better plan. If he could not, he would directly post the announcement of the establishment of the embroidered uniform guards on the bulletin board of the Northern Frontier King's Mansion, and then send someone to deliver the letter to the local government. Wait. Just as Li Zhong turned around, Lin Yuan called out to him. After a moment of silence, the smile on Li Zhong's face disappeared. He turned to look at Lin Yuan with a bitter face, cupped his hands and said, "Lord Dragon King, forgive this student for speaking out of turn, but the business tax exemption must not be allowed. Otherwise, I'm afraid another batch of new aristocratic families will be created. Wouldn't the efforts of Lord Dragon King and this student go to waste?" Lin Yuan looked at Li Zhong silently, his heterochromatic eyes faintly narrowed. No one knew what he was thinking. After a while, Lin Yuan sighed softly and said helplessly, "What is in your head?" Although the aristocratic families today rely on the northern frontier king's mansion for survival, people are forgetful. In another 1 or 2 years, the northern frontier aristocratic families' interference in the welfare of the common people will be more or less forgotten. At that time, the aristocratic families of the northern frontier will be happy again. Indeed. Seeing that Lin Yuan was seriously discussing with him, Li Zhong could not help but think seriously. He quickly nodded and agreed with Lin Yuan. I've said before that aristocratic families cannot be dealt with cleanly. No matter if it's an official, a rich family, or even you, Li Zhong, they will give birth to their own children and families. After a long time, when they have accumulated enough wealth and resources, they will become a new aristocratic family. That's why I'm willing to give up some benefits to make the aristocratic families work for me willingly. You see, the northern frontier is prosperous and rich now, but this is built on the premise that everyone works together. The Northern Frontier Academy is still in the process of being built. Even if I want to promote poor students, I don't have that many poor students to use. Governing the northern frontier still depends on the children of the aristocratic families. If I don't give them some benefits, how can they continue to contribute to the development of the northern frontier? When the time comes, the officials of the northern frontier will hate you and me. No matter how good the government decree is, it will be impossible to carry it out. Lin Yuan's heterochromatic eyes flickered with a faint light as he continued. The business tax exemption is different from the land tax exemption. The latter is equivalent to forcing the common people to give their land to the aristocratic families, to strengthen the power of the aristocratic families. But the former is different. The former is to attract the aristocratic families to invest more resources to strengthen the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. The Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce will then feed the northern frontier. As for the calamity you are worried about, haha. Lin Yuan's final 2 cold laughs instantly shattered Li Zhong's worries. The aristocratic families were the reason why a dynasty was destroyed. This was the reason why Li Zhong viewed the aristocratic families as tigers and wolves. But now, the aristocratic families of the northern frontier had lost their land, and were like tigers and wolves without claws. Even if they could survive in the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, it was equivalent to Lin Yuan slowly feeding them with meat porridge. When Lin Yuan no longer wanted to feed them, these aristocratic families could only walk the path of starvation. After all, when they had their own land and were armed, they couldn't even defeat Lin Yuan. What could they change in the future? Chapter 427. This student understands. Li Zhong cupped his hands towards Lin Yuan, and said with a face full of smiles. This embroidered uniform guard was different from the other government offices without official posts. Right from the start, they were in charge of arresting, punishing, supervising and other important powers. It was most likely not to motivate the officials to improve themselves. After all, although this kind of government office was not a formal establishment, its power was much greater than many formal government offices. If Lin Yuan were to use this government office 60 years later, then it would be impossible for Lin Yuan to defeat 2 successive kings of the northern frontier, without being stained with blood. Therefore, when the embroidered uniform guard was first activated, there would definitely be a group of fierce people who would be transferred in. And they would have to do great things. When he thought of the power of the embroidered uniform guard, Li Zhong could not help but shiver. It was as if he could see the image of the northern frontier in the not-too-distant future. In addition, this king is waiting for you here. There is another task for you to do. Lin Yuan's heterochromatic eyes did not have the slightest ripple, only quietly staring at Li Zhong. Li Zhong was silent for a moment. Then a faint bitter smile suddenly appeared on his face. He said, "Could it be that the Dragon King wants this student to take over the title of King of the Northern Frontier?" Although Li Zhong's face was a bitter smile, but this smile was clearly uglier than crying. First it was Lei Fan, then it was Hu Yan. The 2 kings of the Northern Frontier had fallen one after the other. At this stage, although the Northern Frontier Prince's palace was still able to intimidate the various powers in the Northern Frontier, but it no longer had anything to do with the King of the Northern Frontier in name. The title of King of the Northern Frontier might not even be as useful as someone that Lin Yuan had casually nominated. Moreover, as the one closest to Lin Yuan's thoughts in the Northern Frontier Prince's palace, Li Zhong naturally knew that everything that Lin Yuan had done was just to pave the way. The Northern Frontier that he wanted was not a family's world. When Lin Yuan allowed the Northern Frontier to develop freely, it was estimated that only the new laws of the Northern Frontier would have authority. Titles like officials, princes, nobles, and the like would be useless. At most, they would give their descendants the title of embroidered uniform guard. When that time came, whether there would be a vacancy for them would be a problem. Yes. Lin Yuan did not have the intention to beat around the bush with Li Zhong, and nodded his head very calmly. The smile on Li Zhong's face became uglier and uglier, and his voice was almost choked with sobs. Lord Dragon King, you can't play people like this. Your student, this donkey, can still pull a mill. What Lin Yuan wanted was the Northern Frontier ruled by law, and not the Northern Frontier ruled by a king. Just from the word king in the Northern Frontier, it was clear that from the day this title was issued by the Shenwu dynasty, the existence that inherited this title would not have a good ending. Especially now that the Shenwu dynasty's situation was getting better by the day. When the chaos was quelled, the Northern Frontier would still have to bow their heads to the Shenwu dynasty. Thus, Lin Yuan's idea of attacking the royal power would become even more intense. After all, in the Northern Frontier, the words of the Northern Frontier king did not have much authority. Regardless of whether you were the ruler of a dynasty or an imperial envoy, the result was the same. Whether or not the Northern Frontier was willing to cooperate depended on whether or not Lin Yuan nodded his head. As for Lin Yuan's authority, sorry, Lin Yuan was not some Northern Frontier king. He was the Blackwater Dragon King, the legitimate god of the Northern Frontier conferred by the Shenwu dynasty. At the same time, he was the god of wealth who had absolute control over the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. No matter what identity he had, he was not related to a mortal. When the royal power did not fall behind, Lin Yuan would have a greater say in the Northern Frontier. After all, whoever did not listen would not be able to eat. This king has thought about it, and the only person who is qualified to be the last Northern Frontier king is you. However, Lin Yuan did not pay attention to Li Zhong's complaints. Instead, he looked at Li Zhong with a serious face, and his voice became much lower. This student does not want to be a Northern Frontier king in name only, and even more so, do not want to become a chess piece used by the Shenwu dynasty to check and balance the power of Dragon King Darren. Li Zhong waved his hand at Lin Yuan like a hoodlum and said in a low voice, "If Dragon King Darren wants this student to take over the Northern Frontier king, why not just give this student a quick death right now? Why let this student suffer that kind of humiliation?" Li Zhong traveled thousands of li to the Northern Frontier to seek refuge with Lin Yuan. He originally wanted to make a big career out of it. Naturally, it was impossible for him to muddle-headedly take over a noble title that looked very high and mighty, but in reality, would become a stepping stone when his career had just started. He did not come all the way here to humiliate himself and ask for trouble, right? In particular, Li Zhong had already grasped the knack of Lin Yuan's idea, especially after he started to implement the land clearing project. He did not even need to think to know that Lin Yuan was weaving an impenetrable net. Various yamen officials, nominal positions, and shifter emperors would form this big net. Under the big net were the people of the Northern Frontier, and above the big net was Lin Yuan. As long as Lin Yuan did not lose the support of the people, then his every move in the center of the big net would be accurately fed back to the various areas covered by the big net. These yamen, which divided the authority very carefully, seemed to have scattered the authority of the various local yamen, turning the usually awe-inspiring old men into ferocious beasts without claws and fangs. However, it further stabilized the authority of those in the center. The authority of the various departments was divided, and they would often see each other. Even if someone wanted to cause trouble, a sentence could make other people who did not want to be implicated stand up and report him. Moreover, there was the association of shifter emperors and the embroidered uniform guards watching from the side. The young masters of the embroidered uniform guards were eagerly waiting for something to happen to the various yamen officials, so that they could use their connections to fill in the gaps in the various departments. Although the current embroidered uniform guards were only filling in military positions, there were many military positions in the local yamen. Moreover, after filling in the yamen, they would no longer be a member of the embroidered uniform guards. Naturally, they would no longer be restricted by the rules. If they worked hard and achieved some political achievements, wouldn't promotion be just around the corner? Of course, after they filled in, the new embroidered uniform guards and those who did not fill in would also keep a close eye on them. As long as Lin Yuan could clearly control the two forces, the embroidered uniform guards and the Association of Shifter Emperors, the changes in the officialdom of the northern frontier would forever be a virtuous cycle. No one would dare to make a mistake under the watchful eyes of countless people, and would naturally strictly carry out Lin Yuan's orders. This king is not after your life, and definitely not to humiliate you. After the fall of Lei Fan, the authority of the king of the northern frontier had been mostly lost. Otherwise, Hu Yan would not have been so frightened by this king's words that he stayed in Shunning City obediently. Do you think he did not want to go out, or did not dare to go out? Also, the dignity and prestige of the king of the northern frontier had been completely lost under your scheme, Mr. Li. If you go out and ask the people of the northern frontier, when they hear the words king of the northern frontier, and Hu Yan, who would not spit on the ground? Lin Yuan's heterochromatic eyes seemed to be able to speak. With a smile, he said in a deep voice, "As the person who defeated the villain Hu Yan, Mr. Li, isn't it the most suitable person to take over the northern frontier king?" Chapter 428. This, Li Zhong opened his mouth and wanted to refute Lin Yuan, but he did not know what to say. Because Hu Yan had colluded with the aristocratic families and wanted to stop the northern frontier prince's mansion from renting out large amounts of ownerless land to the commoners at a low price, he had already been nailed to the pillar of shame. Don't look at how Lin Yuan had placed Hu Yan under house arrest in the northern frontier prince's mansion. This was also to protect the northern frontier prince who did not know his own worth and thought that he could go against Lin Yuan by colluding with the aristocratic families. If Hu Yan was released now without any guards by his side, he would probably be torn to shreds by the angry commoners of the northern frontier. If Lin Yuan did not lay his hands on Hu Yan, the northern frontier prince, Hu Yan could be considered to be crippled, and there would be no place for him in the northern frontier. Therefore, the replacement of the prince of the northern frontier prince could not be the same as the previous two times where Lin Yuan said it would be whoever he wanted. It was easier to explain to the Shenwu dynasty, since it was not the time to shed all pretense of cordiality. They were still counting on Lin Yuan to send troops to quell the rebellion. Therefore, even if the Hu clan's descendants opened their eyes, this hereditary prince of the northern frontier prince's mansion would not fall into their hands. However, this time, Lin Yuan had to consider the opinions of the commoners of the northern frontier prince. If he did not care and purely supported a newcomer to the position in order to suppress the royal power, this action alone could cause many of the commoners of the northern frontier to flee. No matter what, the Tianwu continent was still a feudal society. Imperial power and royal power could suppress people to death. No matter how Lin Yuan attacked the royal power, it was useless. There would always be some people who would feel that the prince of the northern frontier was the true master of the northern frontier. If they could not see the good side of the prince of the northern frontier, they would very likely give up everything they had in the northern frontier and become refugees to other regions. The Hu clan's descendants were not good enough. They were not good enough. They were not good enough. They were not good enough. After thinking about it, other than Li Zhong, who was now regarded as a hero by the commoners of the northern frontier, Lin Yuan could not think of anyone else who was suitable to be the last prince of the northern frontier. This student is slow-witted. Dragon King, please enlighten me. Li Zhong bowed lightly to Lin Yuan, and the expression on his face finally looked better. Although he was convinced of Lin Yuan's abilities and plans, he was not a 3-year-old child. He was not willing to be the prince of the northern frontier just because Lin Yuan opened his mouth. This was equivalent to being given the title of Marquis. If Lin Yuan could not give him a good explanation, even if he had to risk offending Lin Yuan, he would still have to run away. Even if he could not run away and died, it was better than dying with infamy and humiliation. Hu Yan has already been crippled. Even if I wanted to give him a chance to repent, the commoners and aristocratic families of the northern frontier will not tolerate him. The Hu clan will no longer have a foothold in the northern frontier. Tell me, if the title of Prince of the Northern Frontier were to fall on Hu Yan or the descendants of the Hu clan, would the commoners be convinced? Although in my eyes, the complete disappearance of royal authority from the northern frontier is the most advantageous situation for me in the northern frontier, I cannot deny that the current northern frontier does indeed need a prince of the northern frontier who can stabilize the people's hearts. In the eyes of the commoners of the northern frontier, you are a great hero who did not hesitate to offend the prince of the northern frontier. At this juncture, the commoners are very against Hu Yan. If I casually choose someone to be the prince of the northern frontier, it may not be able to stabilize the people's hearts. On the contrary, it may even incite a revolt. On the contrary, they would rather see a great hero like you ascend to the throne. Lin Yuan's heterochromatic eyes did not show the slightest fluctuation, as if he did not care about Li Zhong's popularity in the northern frontier. This student is afraid. Li Zhong's mouth was still giving way, but in his heart, he was secretly pondering. The Dragon King in front of him was an existence that anyone dared to scheme against, especially the position of the Prince of the Northern Frontier. In his eyes, it was like a chess piece that could be abandoned at any time. Every stage of the game had its own uses. Once the value was squeezed out, he would not hesitate to crush it. For example, the first prince of the northern frontier, Lei Fan. According to the original intention of the Shenwu dynasty, Hu Yan, as the local tyrant of the northern frontier, was the best candidate to be conferred the title of Prince of the Northern Frontier. After all, Hu Yan had accumulated so many years of wealth in the northern frontier. He also had the Shunning City Garrison Army, the strongest military force in the northern frontier. He was also a member of an aristocratic family. Once he had the support of the Shenwu dynasty, Hu Yan would be able to develop into one of the strongest forces in the northern frontier. However, Lin Yuan had obviously seen the drawbacks of Hu Yan becoming the prince of the northern frontier. He had directly rejected the imperial edict, and had even requested for Hu Yan to be conferred the title of Prince of the Northern Frontier. To the Shenwu dynasty, although Lei Fan's foundation was still shallow, he had Shen Linjun's reserves in his hands, and was not someone who could be easily manipulated. Moreover, his surname was Lei. Naturally, he would be able to obtain the support of the imperial clan court. In addition to the situation of the Shenwu dynasty at that time, even if Lei Qiuxing wanted to fall out with Lin Yuan, there would be countless people below him who would stop him. Thus, Lei Fan was able to replace Hu Yan as the Prince of the Northern Frontier. During the period when Lei Fan was the Prince of the Northern Frontier, he held military power in his hands, and had a strong network of connections. He had even looked like he was going to rule the Northern Frontier together with Lin Yuan. However, after the Northern Frontier had stabilized, Lei Fan had gradually become a puppet. The most frightening thing was that although Lei Fan had realized this, he still did not know what kind of situation he was in. Hence, after he had dragged the sects and clans down with him, he had been dealt with by Lin Yuan without being able to put up any resistance. After Lei Fan, the one who had taken over the position was Hu Yan. At first glance, it seemed as though Lin Yuan had changed his tune, slapping himself in the face. But thinking about it carefully, the reason why Hu Yan had not taken over the position back then was all because of Lin Yuan's scheme. Lei Fan was a chess piece that Lin Yuan had used to stabilize the northern frontier. In the end, being able to drag the sects and clans down with him was already an unexpected surprise. However, with Hu Yan's status, Lin Yuan had probably intended for him to drag the aristocratic families down with him right from the start. Then, what did he have that was worthy of Lin Yuan's scheme? By taking over the position of the Prince of the Northern Frontier, you can allow the people of the Northern Frontier to settle down. At the same time, you should also be very clear that in my plan, royal authority does not have any meaning to exist. So you should be able to see your own position clearly and understand that cooperating with me with all your might is the right way to go. If you were to be like them and have thoughts that you should not have, what kind of ending would you end up in? There is no need for me to remind you. Besides, now that the reputation of the Prince of the Northern Frontier in the Northern Frontier has already dropped to the lowest point, what need do I have to humiliate and suppress you? So not only will I not suppress you, I will even give you more power, allowing you to become the real Prince of the Northern Frontier in this period of time. And what you have to repay me is to use all your strength to implement the rule of law in the Northern Frontier. When necessary, you will even have to use your own body to test the law and show that the rule of law is greater than royal authority. Lin Yuan seemed as though he did not see the light that was constantly flashing in Li Zhong's eyes as he continued to speak. Chapter 429. The distance between the northern frontier and the imperial capital was definitely not close. However, Lin Yuan only took half a day to send the news to the imperial capital. By the time he received the imperial capital's reply and the imperial edict of appointment, it was already 3 days later. It was not that Lei Qiuxing and Zhang Xiu did not value Lin Yuan, but that the important officials in the court valued Lin Yuan too much. In this short period of 1.5 years, Lin Yuan's name was like a nightmare that shrouded over their heads. It was not only because the northern frontier was getting stronger day by day, but also because Lin Yuan's position was never that of a prince or a noble. Even if he was the Grand Secretary of the Imperial Cabinet in the Shenwu dynasty, he could not deny that he was a member of an aristocratic family. As for the other aristocratic families and sects, although they had their enemies, they were more of an excellent helper and cover. Only when everyone worked together could they contend against the supreme imperial power and seek benefits for their families. However, after Lin Yuan took over the throne, he immediately began to reform. First, he established the academy in the northern frontier, which was equivalent to destroying the situation where the aristocratic families and sects controlled knowledge and cultivation methods. This allowed the poor children to have the potential to advance. Then he took over the land and rented it to farmers for farming at a low price and collected taxes. After all, the ownership of the land did not belong to the farmers. Even if they wanted to use the land, they could not do it. Moreover, Lin Yuan's officials and people were there, so why should they curry favor with the aristocratic families? Therefore, the important officials and nobles in the southern frontier were extremely afraid of Lin Yuan's name. If it was not for Lei Qiuxing forbidding them to do anything to the northern frontier, they would have already killed this disaster in the cradle. Lei Qiuxing wanted to use the northern frontier as a test to see the effects of Lin Yuan's new policies. This was already an open secret in the Shenwu dynasty. Although everyone seemed to be harmonious on the surface, countless eyes were secretly watching Lei Qiuxing's every move, afraid that he would imitate the Black Jiao. After all, what the shifter emperor could do, the embroidered uniform guards could do as well. Although those nominal offices were complicated and varied, they were not official organizations. According to the original salary of the Shenwu dynasty, even if the Shenwu dynasty's embroidered uniform guards were 10 times larger than their counterparts in the northern frontier, the Shenwu dynasty could easily support them. Therefore, Lei Qiuxing wanted to replicate the northern frontier's embroidered uniform guards. Of course, if he only followed the strict law enforcement of the northern frontier and the clear division of labor of each department, although many people would lose their source of income, it would not be a serious blow. To put it bluntly, with so many offices in the imperial dynasty, how many of them would be able to eat to their heart's content? The important officials of the Shenwu dynasty were not worried about anything else, but that Lei Qiuxing would imitate the Black Jiao and ask the officials and citizens to abolish their annual tax exemption. He would ask everyone to pay taxes according to the area of their farmland and their output. Even if he could not take back the land under the nobles' names, the imperial dynasty's annual income would increase by 2 to 3 times. Presently, the Shenwu dynasty was in chaos and had suffered countless casualties. Many lands had lost their owners, But it just so happened that the embroidered guard had received Zhang Xiu's orders a long time ago. So they kept a close watch on these lands and didn't give those clans and sects the chance to take over their lands at all. According to Lei Qiusheng's military background, he would not keep these ownerless lands for himself. Most of them were given to the soldiers who had made great contributions, and a small portion was given to the families of the fallen soldiers. However, Lin Yuan's actions in the northern frontier had given Lei Qiusheng a good start. He gave the land in his hands to the commoners to farm, and then gave them a certain tax exemption to attract the commoners to farm. At most, he would spend a bit more money to reward his subordinates, but the annual income from the autumn harvest would be much higher. It was better than giving the land to his subordinates in a one-time deal. At this time, all the officials were present in the throne room of the imperial capital. A red-faced old man wearing a crimson official's robe cupped his hands towards Lei Qiusheng and said in a clear voice, "Your Majesty, please think twice before acting on his request for the Northern Frontier King's position. It hasn't been long, but the Northern Frontier King's position has already changed 3 times. This is a hereditary title, not some cabbage that can be bought from the roadside. It's also not something that the Black Jiao can give to whomever he wants." Lei Qiusheng sat on the dragon throne, coldly sizing up the red-faced old man without saying a word. Seeing that Lei Qiusheng did not respond, the red-faced old man subconsciously frowned and said again, "Your Majesty." Logically speaking, if the emperor raised his own opinion, the officials would have to give an opinion regardless of whether they agreed or not. At this time, the emperor could keep his original opinion, or he could act according to the opinions of the officials. In any case, it was very rare for both sides to agree. After all, both sides had different standpoints. During times of peace, when the emperor's power benefited, the benefits of the aristocratic families would shrink, and vice versa. For example, at this moment, even though he knew what Lin Yuan was scheming, Lei Qiusheng still didn't even frown in the face of the third request for the Northern Frontier King's position to be changed. However, the decree was blocked by the Cabinet Grand Secretary. As the Cabinet Grand Secretary, the red-faced old man believed that no matter if it was a major matter like the appointment of a king or the transfer of a king's position, a reasonable procedure had to be discussed. In the end, after discussing back and forth, the officials actually asked Lei Qiusheng to take back the order and refuse Lin Yuan's request to change the position of king of the northern frontier. It was clear that these officials who were worried that Lin Yuan's position would be threatened could no longer sit still. "Your Majesty." The red-faced old man raised his voice, but he still didn't dare to roar. He only growled. Whether Lei Qiusheng withdrew his decree or not, he should have given him a response at this time. If there was a major matter, the imperial capital would have to discuss it with the cabinet. However, in front of all the officials, Lei Qiusheng directly refused to answer his question. Wasn't this clearly using silence to embarrass him? "Beloved official Xia, don't you like to intercept memorials? Don't tell me that you know nothing about the current situation of the imperial capital." Lei Qiusheng suddenly bent down and looked down at the red-faced old man. He said coldly, "The Frost Mirror Empire and the Azure River Empire have close to 10 million troops stationed at the border of our imperial capital. They are eyeing us covetously and have attracted almost 80% of their military strength. At the same time, all the aristocratic families and sects in the east, west, and north have either directly rebelled or secretly funded the rebels. They all want to establish themselves in this chaotic world. If I destroy one today, another will appear tomorrow. Does beloved official Xia know about this?" The red-faced old man was stunned when he heard this. He lowered his head guiltily and didn't dare to continue looking at Lei Qiusheng. Chapter 430. The cabinet ministers had the right to read the memorials. Even before Lei Qiusheng read the memorials, they had to read them themselves to ensure that there was nothing that the emperor couldn't know about before handing the memorials to him. Of course, it was completely different for the emperor to know through the embroidered uniform guard and through the memorials. After all, no matter how many secrets the embroidered uniform guard knew, the Xinwu dynasty couldn't legitimately interfere. They could only use the embroidered uniform guard spies within the Shimwu dynasty to deal with it. To put it bluntly, it was just a dispute in the Jianghu. However, cabinet ministers only had the right to read memorials. When the decree came from Lei Qiusheng's imperial study, the ministers could only follow the instructions on the cover and deliver it to where it should be delivered. They couldn't read a single word inside. After all, that was the emperor's thoughts. Ordinary people didn't have the right to know. The red-faced elder had read Lei Qiusheng's decree and made it known to the entire court. He had clearly violated Lei Qiusheng's taboo. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been left out in the imperial court. This subject knows a little. The red-faced elder resisted the numbness in his scalp and replied in a low voice. Then do you know how many rebels there are in the north, how many there are in the south, and whether the rebels on the east and west are locals or disguised as soldiers from the two dynasties? Does beloved official Xia know these things? Lei Qiusheng raised his brows and asked coldly. This humble subject doesn't know. The red-faced elder shook his head, his eyes dim. There are more than 50 million rebels in the 4 directions. Every night we clear them out, their numbers will increase. However, my soldiers are currently resisting the attacks of the two dynasties on the east and west. They simply can't free themselves to deal with these rebels. The only person that can be mobilized, Shen Linjun, has gone to war. During this period of time, he has been fighting in the north and south. The results seem to be quite good, but in my opinion, these battles are King worthless. As Lei Qiusheng spoke, he was so angry that he laughed and said coldly, Official Xia, that good nephew of yours even dares to embezzle Shen Linjun's provisions and military equipment. How dare he? No wonder my army is getting weaker by the day. It turns out that even the roots are rotten. Before Lei Qiusheng could finish his sentence, a series of gasps could be heard in the throne room. The red-faced old man's nephew was the commander-in-chief of the Heavenly Inspire army. He was in charge of supplying the 3 armies with provisions and armaments. At the same time, he was also the largest strategist department in the Shimwu dynasty. In the early years, the people on duty there were new aides and strategists who had joined Lei Qiusheng before he rose to power. But now, it had become a government office where some people took advantage of their position for personal gain and filled their own pockets. They even dared to embezzle the provisions and armaments of the emperor's personal army. What kind of concept was this? They were greedy and stupid. If it weren't for that good nephew of yours, how could my Shen Linjun have to find a place to rest and reorganize after losing more than half of his men to a group of rebel soldiers who had been trained for less than half a year? Lei Qiusheng narrowed his eyes slightly and said coldly, If my Shen Linjun could still fight, why would I count on those 2 evil creatures, Lin Yuan and Lei Qiuming? Do you think I don't know what it means to raise a tiger and invite calamity? The problem now is, if I don't raise a tiger, how will I deal with the rebel soldiers who are causing chaos everywhere? Will I rely on the benevolence and righteousness that you, Scholar Xia, speak of? Your Majesty. The red-faced old man froze as if he had been struck by lightning. Although he knew that his nephew's hands were not clean, he had never thought that his nephew would be so daring. Who didn't know that Shen Linjun represented the emperor's personal army in Shimwu Royal County? What was the difference between making a move on Shen Linjun and directly stealing money from the emperor's treasury? Official Xia, whether you are willing or not, this edict must be delivered to the northern frontier today. Later, I guarantee that your head will be moved along with your nephew's. Slapping the dragon throne heavily, Lei Qiusheng stood up and stared coldly at the red-faced old man. His expression was as gloomy as water. There was no suspense as to whether or not the red-faced old man's nephew was stupid. After all, no matter how strong the father's relationship was, it was impossible for an idiot to sneak into the Heaven Inspire army, which was full of strategists. Therefore, the red-faced old man's nephew embezzling Shen Linjun's supplies was certainly not as simple as it seemed. At the very least, it was a dereliction of duty. At the very least, it was a crime that could implicate 9 generations of his family. Humph. Snorting coldly, Lei Qiusheng's cold gaze swept across the faces of everyone present. Many of the important officials present were considered to be the trusted aides of Xie Xinghai in the previous dynasty. At that time, They were working for Xie Xinghai while secretly contacting him, all the way until the day his troops arrived. According to Xie Xinghai's original plan, they could at least delay him for 10 days to half a month. At that time, the troops from all over the country would arrive. In the end, those important officials and generals that Xie Xinghai trusted very much naturally opened the gates of the imperial capital and welcomed him and his subordinates into the imperial capital. Now that Shenwu dynasty was in chaos, it was even more chaotic than Wanjian dynasty. If these important officials didn't have any thoughts in their hearts, the person sitting on the dragon throne right now would probably be Xie Xinghai. Everyone, if there is anything else, please quickly report it. If there is nothing else, please dismiss the court. When Lei Qiuxing saw that everyone was silent like cicadas in winter, he directly sat back down on the dragon throne and looked disdainfully at all the officials below. Even if tens of years had passed, these people still wouldn't forget who was the most capable war god of Shenwu dynasty. As long as Lei Qiuxing sat in the imperial capital and didn't move, even if the entire Shenwu dynasty's army was wiped out, they wouldn't doubt that Lei Qiuxing had a trump card that could turn the situation around. After these tens of years of purging, the entire Shenwu dynasty's subjects were clear about one thing. Anyone who went against Lei Qiuxing was now buried under the earth. As the price for the important official's concession, Lei Qiuxing's investigation of his subordinates who were suspected of colluding with the enemy stopped abruptly at Scholar Xia's nephew. An imperial edict appointing Li Zhong as the new king of the northern frontier was also quickly sent out of the imperial capital. This couldn't be said to be a complete concession. After all, although the Heavenly Inspire Army's commander-in-chief wasn't a low rank and was a position that all generals had to curry favor with, to put it bluntly, he was just a high-ranking quartermaster. Even if Lei Qiuxing eliminated him, it wouldn't cause an uproar in the military headquarters, and it wouldn't implicate any important figures that even he found troublesome. However, once Lin Yuan and Lei Qiuming reached an agreement with him and started to send troops to wipe out the rebels in the north and south, the situation would be completely stabilized. Also, the two dynasties that wanted to take a big bite of meat but didn't want to fight to the death would also pack up and retreat. After this period of time, I will settle accounts with all of you one by one. Lei Qiuxing silently lowered his head. The cold light in his eyes seemed to be somewhat penetrating. Chapter 431. The situation in the northern frontier was changing, and the undercurrent was surging in the imperial capital. At this stage, the rebel army in the northern frontier was terrified. Every day, they were worried that Shen Linjun would kill his way to their doorstep. In the end, while Shen Linjun was still stationed in the south, they were waiting for another wave of death. The arrival of the 300,000 southern expedition immediately frightened the rebel army in the city. When the defenders on the city wall saw the densely packed southern expedition with bright armor outside the city, they were so scared that they almost couldn't hold their weapons steadily. Although there were many rebel forces in the northern frontier, everyone knew that the true leader of the northern frontier was the Black Jiao who controlled the military and politics of the northern frontier with the body of a demon beast. Only the Black Jiao was the legitimate existence appointed by the Shenwu dynasty. Although the Shenwu dynasty was now rising everywhere, and rebel armies were appearing one after another, there weren't many rebels who really wanted to be the emperor. They just wanted to take advantage of this chaotic world to lay a foundation for their descendants. Especially after the northern frontier broke away from the control of the Shenwu dynasty, the Blackwater Dragon King was conferred by the Shenwu dynasty with the title of Northern Frontier King and Blackwater Dragon King, which made countless people envious. Things in the world were often like this. They seemed to only see the current glory of Lin Yuan, but forgot that when Lin Yuan was in control of the northern frontier, the Shenwu dynasty's first reaction was to transfer troops from the coastal battlefield in the southern frontier and merge them with the Xiongwu army to suppress Lin Yuan. The commander said that we have to take this city before the sun sets. Tonight, we will spend the night in the city. Li Zhongxing's bodyguard pulled on the reins, and the horses under him reared up. The neighing of the horses and the voices of the people mixed together, but his every word was accurately transmitted to the frontline soldiers' ears. Kill. The 300,000 Southern Expedition soldiers following Li Zhongxing raised their weapons and roared in unison. The city in front of them was not large, but it was actually the largest group of rebels near the northern frontier. They occupied 4 cities under their rule. In terms of territory and military strength, they were stronger than the 6 border cities. However, compared to the northern frontier, which had been hiding their strength for more than 4 months, they were still ants that could be easily crushed. Li Zhongxing rode on his warhorse. His eagle-like eyes landed on the city wall in front of him as he shouted, "Boys, kill!" This group of rebel soldiers looked like they could not withstand a single blow, but in the face of such a powerful northern frontier army, they were only scared. They did not give up the defense line because of their low morale. The 2 sides were in a deadlock for the time it took for an incense stick to burn. Li Zhongxing did not even see a single deserter. In his heart, he had already raised his evaluation of the enemy's general by several levels. However, this did not stop Li Zhongxing from taking the city. Ever since he came out of seclusion, he had never thought that he would lose. All he was thinking about was how to win beautifully. Following the commander's command, the soldiers who had been waiting for a long time immediately roared and charged, aiming their weapons at the city wall. Fight! Those who retreat, behead. Also, if you take the head of a northern frontier soldier, you can exchange it with me for 5 taels of silver. On the city wall, a bald man in his 30s with a mustache rubbed his head and carried a heavy machete on his shoulder. There was not even a trace of fear in his eyes. With the city wall as a buffer zone, the 2 armies clashed head-on. In an instant, swords flashed and arrows rained down like locusts. Siege weapons were placed on top of the city wall. Shiny blades were drawn from their sheaths. Boiling fighting spirit and loud shouts began to reverberate around the city. The Southern Expedition went down south from the checkpoint set up in Shunning City. As soon as they came out of the checkpoint, they divided into 4 groups and went straight to the few groups of rebels closest to the northern frontier. They almost took down 3 groups of rebels in the first day. Although the remaining group resisted tenaciously, everyone could see that they were like arrows at the end of their flight. If it was not because it was difficult to attack the city after dark, it was estimated that the next day would be the last struggle of this group of rebels. The strength of the Southern Expedition's fighting strength was obviously beyond many people's expectations. They were able to take down 4 groups of rebels in the first day. Moreover, this was because the Southern Expedition spent most of their time on the road. Even Lei Qiuxing's Shen Linjun did not dare to say that he could directly divide his troops to attack several groups of rebels at the same time and win. The news of the northern frontier sending troops to suppress the rebels quickly spread throughout the Xinwu dynasty. It could be said that some people were happy and some were sad. The happy ones were the orthodox group of the Xinwu dynasty headed by Lei Qiuxing. After all, they knew their own situation. When Shen Linjun left the imperial capital, he was still awe-inspiring. However, not to mention that he was unable to fight again, it was obviously impossible for him to sweep away the rebels like before. As the former god of war and god of war, Lei Qiuxing quickly ordered Shen Linjun to stay put and rest. He quietly waited for the movements of the northern frontier and Qingpeng. This was because he believed that no matter what Lin Yuan and Lei Qiuming were thinking, they would not let go of such a good opportunity. Even if he had to sell the foundation that he had painstakingly built to the Xinwu dynasty, he would have to sell it for a good price, right? As for the rebels in Lei Qiuxing's eyes, they were even less of a problem. In the past, it was difficult for him to seize the opportunity to reshuffle the cards of the Xinwu dynasty. This time, they stretched out their necks to be cut. Lei Qiuxing had even less reason to let them go. If it was not for the fact that he could not mobilize the military forces in his hands, why would he have to lower his head and try to rope in Lin Yuan and Lei Qiuming? Lei Qiuxing was very clear that although the Xinwu dynasty was in chaos, the rebels outside still did not dare to go too far. Especially when Lei Qiuxing still had a card in his hand that had not been played yet. Even if they had 10 times the courage, they would not dare to act recklessly. However, once Shen Linjun's undefeatable banner fell, the rebels would not just simply cause chaos in their own territory. There was no guarantee that many of them would immediately lead their troops to attack the imperial capital. They would take this opportunity to set their sights on the supreme throne. Therefore, Lei Qiuxing would rather stop Xin Linjun's advance and let the rebels continue to jump around than let Xin Linjun take the risk of ruining his own undefeatable signboard. Although Lei Qiuxing's actions made countless discerning people see the weakness of the giant beast that was the Xinwu dynasty, Xin Linjun had not been completely annihilated. Even if they had any thoughts, they did not have the guts to be the first to stand out. At most, they would occupy a few territories and wait for the imperial edict to be issued. After all, there were so many rebels in the Xinwu dynasty. Even if Lei Qiuxing was known as the Eternal Emperor, he had to understand that the law could not punish the masses. If he really offended the aristocratic families in the world, even if the Xinwu dynasty was in a precarious state, they could easily overturn the entire Xinwu dynasty if they worked together. Chapter 432. Of course, whether the country could be saved or not depended on Lei Qiuxing's methods. It also depended on whether Lei Qiuxing's sons and grandsons had the ability to suppress the heroes. Even if Lei Qiuxing's might was unparalleled and could suppress the world's aristocratic families, it was impossible for Lei Qiuxing to wipe out all the aristocratic families. When Lei Qiuxing died of old age, how long could his sons and grandsons last under the watchful eyes of the wolves? Don't forget, the Xinwu dynasty didn't get the country righteously. Even if the country was taken away, it was because the sons and grandsons didn't have the ability. But these were all things that the Xinwu dynasty had to consider. It had nothing to do with the southern expedition that was currently attacking the rebels on the northern frontier. Because of the problem of their birth, these wolf cubs raised in the northern frontier were usually brave and fierce. Now that there was no invasion of demon beasts, they were usually bored to death in the northern frontier. Now that they were pulled out to quell the rebellion, they were all trying their best to wrestle with the rebels in the south. But in the end they were greatly disappointed. They even felt that it was better to practice martial arts in their own camps. The backbone of the rebel army formed by the aristocratic families and sects were either disciples or family soldiers. Usually, there was no difference between them. In terms of cultivation, they were even higher than the southern expedition. But as the old saying goes, in the face of a real war, the individual strength below the Kongming realm could influence a part of the battlefield, but it couldn't change the direction of the whole war. Even for the Heaven Dipper realm cultivators, the aura energy in their bodies and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth seemed to be circulating endlessly, but there was a limit to the endurance of the body. Once this limit was exceeded, even if the enemy didn't attack, the body would collapse on its own. Therefore, on the battlefield, what was relied on was the ability of the commander-in-chief and the tacit understanding and obedience of the frontline soldiers. After the first day of the war, there was no lack of rebel generals dying in battle, and the entire battlefront directly collapsed. If such a defeat fell into the eyes of fierce generals like Li Zhongxing and Zhang Qilin, it was simply an unforgivable sin. Any troops that directly retreated because of the death of their generals, even if they weren't immediately punished by military law, would have to peel off a layer of skin when they returned to the camp. As for becoming a deserter and becoming a bandit, that was even more impossible. Currently, rebel armies were running rampant everywhere in the dynasty. The small and medium-sized mountain bandits, roving bandits, and Xiangma had either become rebel warlords under the support of various aristocratic families or been annexed or annihilated by various rebel armies. Even if Li Zhongxing did not find trouble with them, they would not be able to find a place to stand in the current Xinwu dynasty. On the other hand, the southern expedition, who had undergone strict military training, even if the general in charge of the grassroots command died in battle, as long as there was no sound of beating the gong, it would not hinder their tide-like offensive. The general died in the position of lieutenant, and the lieutenant died in the position of Qianhu. Compared to the collapse of the rebel army's front line after the death of their general, the southern expedition hoped that their immediate superior would die in battle. After all, when the superior died, it was time for the subordinates to replace him. After a battle, It was not rare for a soldier to be directly promoted to a deputy general. Of course, this was a bonus that only happened during the war. If it was during peacetime, it would not matter if the superior died, but the subordinates who could replace him would depend on the individual's ability and the results of their daily training. Especially when they heard about the establishment of the genie guards before they set off. They were even more enthusiastic about taking advantage of this war to rise up the ranks. After all, if they could not be promoted now, there would be plenty of people to fight for their jobs in the future. However, under the incentive of this promotion model, it did not mean that a general could sit at the rear and watch the generals and soldiers below rush forward dauntlessly. Li Zhongxing had set up a supervision team early in the morning. Other than the generals and military advisors, no matter what military rank they had, once the military order was given, they had to lead the people to rush forward. The person with the highest position had to be at the front. If the person behind did not stop, they had to continue to rush forward. When you arrived, the person behind you would take over your position and continue to rush forward. The rebel armies that fought against the southern expedition had only one feeling after a day of fighting. This group of wolf cubs from the northern frontier were really king unafraid of death. At night, General, all the battle reports have been sent here. The guard placed the 3 parchments on Li Wenzhong's desk. He then cupped his hands and stood to one side to wait upon Li Wenzhong. The rebel armies that they fought along the way were not newbies. Although the local aristocratic families raised the army, the composition of the officers in the army was different from those aristocratic families who stuffed their juniors into the army for gilding. They were all veterans from various armies. Their obedience to orders and training requirements in all aspects were also close to that of the regular army. They could be considered as one of the stronger rebel armies in the northern frontier. But even so, the soldiers trained by the retired officers and the soldiers trained by Shen Linjun's reserve officers were still 2 different things. In addition, this city was close to Shunning City, so it was not threatened by the demon beasts. There were no troops from other dynasties nearby, so the city's defensibility was almost 0. It was only a little better than the current situation of the northern frontier without a city wall. After all, the 6 border cities were the first line of defense, and Shunning City was the second line of defense. If Shunning City was breached, then the demon beasts would be able to drive straight to the Wei River. Only then would they be blocked by the third line of defense of the Shenwu dynasty, with the help of the Wei River. Once Shunning City was breached, it would be equivalent to a land of death. It was originally used as a place to live, so there was no need to spend a lot of money to build city defense fortifications. Of course, even if it was built, there was no possibility of it being used. After all, in the past few decades, the demon beasts in the Hengduan Mountains had only suppressed the original Zhongshan City. They had not even crossed Zhongshan City, let alone breaching Shunning City. It was not until the appearance of Lin Yuan that the situation of the demon beasts struggling at death's door in the Hengduan Mountains was broken. The first round of assault organized by Li Zhongxing did not take down the city wall, because the wall, which was 30 to 40 feet high and completely made of stone, could not withstand the first round of assault at all. It was directly broken into pieces. After that, it was the bloody close combat. Although the combat strength of this rebel army was not weak, compared with the southern expedition that Li Zhongxing had almost trained as an imperial army, they were not even a little bit better. Even though their cultivation was high and their numbers were comparable, they only gave the southern expedition a head-on blow at the beginning of the battle. As the 2 sides were entangled and anxious, the balance of victory had been tilting towards the southern expedition. These bastards are all here to show off. Li Zhongxing did not even look at the 3 battle reports on the desk. He stretched himself and said in a deep voice, "I won't look at the specific written reports. You just need to tell me the general situation. If there is no problem, retouch the 4 battle reports and send them back to the northern frontier." Chapter 433. The bodyguard nodded slightly and said in a deep voice, "Those bastards aren't just showing off. Apart from us, the other 3 armies have more or less suffered losses. In total, They have lost 20% of their men and wasted countless siege weapons. Those bastards who came to deliver the letter even asked me to intercede on their behalf, asking the marshal not to punish them. The victory at the beginning was indeed commendable, but it could also be divided into great victories and tragic victories. Lin Yuan asked Li Zhong to conquer the entire north instead of eliminating the rebels near the northern frontier. If he failed at the beginning, even if Lin Yuan didn't punish him, Zhang Qilin wouldn't laugh at him, and Li Zhongxing would be too ashamed to show his face in the future. Therefore, it was necessary to save men. Otherwise, if he couldn't conquer the north, he would have no place to replenish his men if he lost the southern expedition. The northern battlefront army on the northern frontier, and the new army under the banner of the Fallen Star Army, were all waiting to be fed. Wasn't it obvious that Lin Yuan sent him out at this time? Although Zhang Qilin and Li Zhongxing were each in charge of an army, they were both from Shunlinjun. In this situation, they naturally worked for Lin Yuan. However, when Lin Yuan and Lei Qiuxing were competing, Lin Yuan couldn't use the officers of the imperial army to control his own troops, could he? Was he tired of living? Was he tired of living? After thinking for a while, Li Zhongxing shook his head with a chuckle and said, "These bastards are usually arrogant. Now that they are out for training, of course, they don't want to lose. In addition, it is their first time on the battlefield. They are eager to make contributions, so it is understandable that they choose radical tactics. Besides, if they only count the losses, do they have the courage to send me the battle report? Don't play any tricks." Haha. The personal guard let out a few hollow laughs. He didn't feel embarrassed at all because his prank was exposed. He continued, "Marshal, it's true that we have lost 20% of our 1,300,000 brothers. But if we add up the surrendered soldiers that we have taken in, our total number hasn't decreased, but has increased instead. In fact, we are approaching the 2 million mark. How could there be no deaths in a war? However, a truly capable general could always increase the number of troops under his command as the war progressed. Now, not only had they won the first battle, the number of troops under their command had increased by 2/3. This was naturally a joyous occasion. In the end, as soon as the soldier finished reporting the good news, he realized that Li Zhongxing's expression had instantly turned gloomy. The smile on his face had also instantly stiffened. He did not know what he had said wrong to make this living king of hell unhappy. "I asked you to incorporate the surrendered soldiers, not to be assimilated by them. Fight according to this plan. After another 2 or 3 cities, I will bring my men to crusade against these bastards." Li Zhongxing glanced at his guard and scolded, "Tell those bastards to immediately reorganize their troops and cut down the surrendered soldiers. Kick out all those crooked people with bad records." Good heavens! After the first battle, the number of troops had doubled. If something went wrong later, who would be responsible? After the first battle, they still had to continue to push forward and incorporate the surrendered soldiers for their own use. It wasn't like they were going to drag them back to the northern frontier to slowly train and correct the bad habits of the surrendered soldiers. Had those bastards never thought that if the surrendered soldiers in their own troops had the same number, or even more than the main troops, how would they end up with an explosion or a mutiny? Yes, I will go and remind them right away." After being scolded by Li Zhongxing, the guard seemed to have woken up from a dream. A layer of cold sweat even appeared on his forehead. Only then did Li Zhongxing nod his head, and a gloomy expression flashed across his face. He suddenly realized that Lin Yuan seemed to have dug a big hole for him. 3 million Southern Expedition soldiers was indeed a lot. The number of soldiers was enough for him to directly divide his troops and attack several rebel armies at the same time. However, even if these 3 million soldiers could fight all the way from the northern frontier to the Wei River, it was impossible for them to occupy all the territories in the north. If he wanted to control the territories in the north, he could only use the surrendered soldiers. However, the surrendered soldiers' military discipline was one thing, and the surrendered soldiers' loyalty was another. He wasn't sincerely trying to conquer the world for Lin Yuan. Although he was still in a dilemma, he still had to choose between Lin Yuan and Lei Qiuxing. If they were the recruits that he had personally trained, He would be able to execute all orders with a single order. When the time came, they would defect to the Shenwu dynasty or continue to listen to Lin Yuan's orders. It would all depend on who they wanted to follow. However, when the number of surrendered soldiers far exceeded the original southern expedition, it was hard to say what would happen. The rebel army had already shed all pretense of cordiality with the Shenwu dynasty. They only cared about their own interests and didn't care about the empire's reputation. Throughout the entire Shenwu dynasty, before the southern sea route was opened, only the northern frontier could export phase from the Hengduan mountain range and trade with the other 6 empires. The Shenwu dynasty was in chaos, and it could be said that almost every region was losing money. The front lines needed to be replenished, the equipment needed to be changed, the soldiers needed to be fed, and the deceased soldiers needed to be compensated. After the war, the various regions needed to restore civil administration, which was still a huge expense. Currently, the only place that earned money in the entire Shenwu dynasty was the northern frontier and the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. It was all thanks to Lei Qiuxing's decades of hard work that they were able to maintain the chaos and not collapse. Who could give more benefits than Lin Yuan? The entire Shenwu dynasty was speechless. No matter how great the future was, it was useless. The other party had already rebelled. If they couldn't obtain any benefits, who would be willing to care about them? Thinking of this, a thin layer of cold sweat appeared on Li Zhongxing's forehead. He felt as if he had been killed by Lin Yuan. There was a sharp blade flashing on his head. As long as he had the thought of betraying Lin Yuan, he and the southern expedition would immediately vanish. He had separated his subordinates and assigned them to be the leaders of the surrendered soldiers. Once they rebelled, they would definitely be unable to control the situation. At that time, they might not even be able to protect a part of the battlefield. However, if he gathered his subordinates together, they could only protect a part of the battlefield. When the Fallen Star Army came out of the northern frontier, the Fallen Star Army would deal with him the same way he had dealt with the rebel army. As one of the bodyguards of the 2 great generals of the Wanjian dynasty, the Fallen Star Army's training skills were no worse than Shen Linjun's. He was now in a dilemma. If he couldn't grasp the proper measure of the expedition to the north, he would die. If he hesitated, he would still die. Unless he could really fully satisfy Lin Yuan's wishes and steadily hand over the entire north to him and watch him, and the Shenwu dynasty divide the river to rule. Only then would he be able to get a good end. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.